Honorable members, a very good morning to you all. Thank you for availing yourselves for the meeting. The stakeholders who are going to participate, so far I've seen, I'm aware that Matthew Parks is here on behalf of COSATU. I don't know about the People's Budget Collaborate, but there's an apology. They made a request that to join the meeting late. Is that so, Lubabalo? Or is the other one?
That's correct, Chairperson. It's
Okay.
the People's Budget. That's correct, Chair.
Okay. And then the third one, Matthew will give us the overview.
That's correct.
On the third presentation. So, honorable members who are here today, dealing with public hearings on the Adjustment Appropriation Bill B20 of 2021. You're most welcome, media that is on the platform, Team Appropriation, all of you, you're welcome. Thank you so much for being there. We are getting there. We're getting there. I know we're all tired. There was no break. I see even Honorable Ryder still has the energy. We need that, all of us. Having said that, honorable members, I'll go to number 2, apologies. Can we record the apologies, Lubabalo and Estelle?
Thank you so much, Chairperson, and good morning to yourself and all honorable members, including colleagues on the platform. Chairperson, we received 2 apologies, an apology from Honorable Ngweta. However, Honorable Ngweta indicated that should it be necessary for her to join the meeting, we must call her. She will join the meeting, even if it's for a short period of time. And another apology is from Honorable Karim. He indicated that he might join the meeting 15-20 minutes late, but he is coming, Chairperson. Thank you. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Lubabalo. I think you can assist Comrade Matthew flag his presentation.
Let me quickly give him the right to, as a co-chairperson.
Okay. So he will flag it himself.
Yes, Chairperson, he will flag it himself. I think he is in the process of doing that. Over to you, Chair. I've made him a co-host.
Okay, Comrade Matthew. There you go.
Okay. Hey, thanks very much, Comrade Chair. Yeah, I can. If you want, I can start then.
Yes. You
can. Sorry, my voice is a little bit rough. I got COVID last week, but I can say, Comrade Chair, the vaccine really is a miracle worker. That my COVID experience has just been a bad flu, so my voice might sound a little bit coarse, but it just shows you the power of the vaccine and why we should all take it. But yeah, so no, thanks very much, Comrade Chair, and honorable members for giving us a space as COSATU.
Is it only me who's struggling to hear Comrade Matthew? Maybe.
I'm hearing him fine, Chair.
So it's my network. You can continue, Comrade Matthew.
Okay, no, thanks very much, Chair. And yeah, hopefully you'll be able to hear us. But I can hear you fine, Honorable Chairperson. Thanks. So yeah, so let me just jump to it. I won't go into all the issues. Some of the issues we have already raised before with this committee in the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill. But of course, just to highlight the key economic and fiscal challenges facing us, from the deepest recession to an unemployment rate which is now past 46%. The fact that we have 27 million people dependent upon the state for social grants, and many companies are closing or retrenching. And of course, we all know the state is bleeding billions to corruption, wasteful expenditure, collapsing SOEs, etc. And of course, we do need to get the debt trajectory under control. Chair, I also don't need to go too much into austerity and our stimulus issues. except where we just to kind of highlight the point that I think as COSATU, we disagree with government, where it seems to view the premise of what needs to be done through cutting expenditure. We think we actually need to do many things at once, including deal with the leakages in the state, but also seeing how can we stimulate the economy going forward. Chair, just to kind of really jump into the Adjustment Appropriations Bill's key components, I think one of the key parts is around the Public Service Wage Agreement for 2021. That's a huge chunk of it. And I think also just from our side as Labour, we enter those engagements fully cognizant and aware that the state is under huge pressures. The wage agreement, which was a difficult one to sell to workers, but nonetheless, over 61% of public servants voted to endorse it, is the lowest in many, many years. Large components of it are below inflation and are simply once-off gratuity payments, which wouldn't come onto the wage bill permanently. And I think that was an effort by unions to assist the state in terms of stabilizing the fiscus and rebuilding the state, but also ensuring some level of protection for public servants from the wages being eroded by inflation. But Chair, I think we do want to assist government. We do not want to see government collapse. That will hit workers, be it in the public or private sectors, heavily. And I think our simple proposals around how to find a win-win solution from our side, one is to respect collective bargaining. That makes it easier for unions to negotiate and to sell compromises and agreements to workers, to honor those agreements. We think there can be significant savings to the fiscus if we have a single collective bargaining agreement for the entire state, which include the entities, the SOEs. Often you find in these entities and SOEs, which constitute about a third of the state, you don't have salary caps. You have a ballooning of the wage level at the top and significant wastage, etc. But I think there is a need for wage caps upon senior management in the SOEs and the entities in particular, where, for example, you might have executives at a SOE earning more than the president. And of course, we think politically it is critical for government to lead from the front and to institute not just freezes for what ministers earn or what senior management earn, but even cuts. And of course, I need to review the ministerial handbook. Comrade Chair, we do want to also highlight the concerns our unions are beginning to raise around the headcount reductions for police officers, for teachers and other critical frontline service delivery posts. But Chair, I think the other key component of the Adjustment Appropriations Bill, which we really want to welcome and support, has been the Presidential Employment Stimulus Program. In the initial budget, there was 11 billion rand set aside for it. That's managed to help create 550,000 jobs, helping young people get some experience and a salary. So I think we really want to appreciate it's being doubled to over 24 billion rand per annum for the next 3 years, or 74 billion cumulatively. And we think we should see how can we enhance it further, expand it further going forward. Just to get to some of the departments, we are worried about basic education, that the allocation to it over the MTEF period is below inflation. In this Adjustment Appropriations Bill, there's a shifting of 97 million rand from sanitation to maths teachers. And of course, we welcome the additional maths teachers, but we are worried that we're just simply failing to come to terms with the sanitation backlog in basic education. The department had set itself a target of 1,000 schools to receive adequate sanitation this year. It could only meet 20% of that target. And this really points to a huge management problem in the department. We think Parliament would be well placed to hold the minister and the DG accountable. We've all been discussing this, including this committee, for many years. And there needs to be a serious plan tabled by the department at Parliament to ensure that all schools can have access to decent water sanitation by the end of next year. We don't think it should be delayed any longer than that. It's not that difficult a thing to do. On the health front, Comrade Chair, we are worried about the cuts of the MTEF period to Department of Health by 0.6%. But having said that, we do welcome in the adjusted appropriations an overall 2.2 billion rand increase, but specifically an additional 2.3 billion rand for the fight against COVID-19, for vaccines, for nurses. The 246 million rand for medical interns. We hope that'll help to address a huge crisis there. and the 50 million rand for primary healthcare workers. But we do think we do need to reinforce the Department of Health and NHI funding over the MTEF, not to be exacting cuts in that department. Comrade Chair, around GCIS, we do feel as COSATU that government has run a very tepid publicity campaign on the need to persuade people to vaccinate. And I think part of the reason why we have such low vaccination rates, well, for many reasons, but one of them we think is that we haven't run a sufficiently enhanced publicity campaign. GCIS says it doesn't have enough money. Yet in this adjustment appropriations bill, we've actually reduced the allocation by 5 million rand. At the same time, 150 million rand we would have known was squandered in the Department of Health to this digital vibes contracts. So we do feel that's something that should have been reconsidered and hopefully in February to be attended to. Around employment and labor, I think we want to welcome the allocation of 245 million rand under the Presidential Employment Program. We do remain concerned about the cut of 100 million rand per annum to the CCMA. This occurs at a time when 2.1 million workers have lost their jobs during this pandemic. But having said that, Comrade Chair, as COSATU, we try to assist government to address this issue. We've managed to effect significant savings at NEDLEC over this past pandemic. We managed to effect about 20% savings. That comes to about 10 million rand a year. So it's a very small amount in the broader scheme of things, but in this current financial year, instead of us returning to Treasury, Treasury has agreed for that money to be given to the CCMA to assist it with upgrading its call centers, assisting workers who have lost their jobs. It's still a drop in the ocean for the CCMA, but we hope it will send a message to other Department of Labor entities to also provide some sort of shifting of resources and solidarity to the CCMA. But we hope in February that we would see a reversal of these cuts to the CCMA and see how can we reprioritize some funding to assist them. Chair, on social development, we are worried about the cuts to social development over the MTEF period, and that's specifically the 350 COVID grant, which is meant to come to an end in March. Chair, we think that grant should be extended, it should be made permanent. We should see how could we increase it to the food poverty line. But in essence, it's a basic income grant. It's provided a huge amount of solidarity and relief to the poor. And the fact that you see queues every day at the post office in the hundreds shows people are desperate for it. But we also cannot afford to be a society which leaves 8 million people with no source of income. It shouldn't be the permanent solution. The permanent solution should be to help people find jobs, to create jobs. But in the short and medium term, we should give relief to people. Chair, we do want to welcome the 290 million rand and for social workers employment and the 181 million rand for early childhood workers as well. Those are critical interventions too. On the trade and industry front, Chair, I think we want to welcome the 800 million rand for employment opportunities, the 200 million rand for critical infrastructure, the 500 million rand for the IDC's industrial financing, which has gone a long way to helping rebuild destroyed companies in KZN and Gauteng after the violence. But we are worried about some of the cuts, which is 104 million rand for export market and investment assistance, 337 million rand for manufacturing development incentives, and 200 million rand for the SEZs. And we think if there's one department which should be protected from cuts, it should be the DTIC. If we are serious about creating jobs, creating industries, and lessening the dependency of people upon the state for relief. Chair, we do want to welcome, under the Neighborhood Development Partnership grant under Treasury, the 841 million rand for this program, which has helped to employ over 32,000 people for neighborhood cleaning. But we are worried about the 52 million rand cut for financial accounting and SCM systems. This is worrying because you have a government financing systems which lose billions of rands to corruption, wasteful expenditure. And in fact, we think such programs should actually be enhanced. Chair, on transport, we have a peculiar situation where in the city of Cape Town, Metrorail has, on many of its lines, ground to a halt during this pandemic. I think we would know, for example, that at Langa Station, there's an informal area built across the train lines. And that's critical, not just for the residents of Langa, but for most of the Cape Flats, because those lines run through Langa Station. At the same time, we have my city was allocated 1.3 billion rand in the city of Cape Town. It couldn't spend the money, that money has been rolled over. So we think, Chair, that really points to a crisis of leadership in the city and government, which allowed that money either to be rolled over or not to be spent somehow, but it should have been spent either at Metro Rail or my city, and not simply to be rolled over when public transport has been devastated in Cape Town in the pandemic. But I think, Chair, there is a need for PRASA to come to Parliament with a serious plan to rebuild its capacity, given its critical nature or role to transport workers to work. Just moving towards the end, Chair, we have a similar concern around the rolling over of 582 million rand by the Mfuleni municipality. This is for the Vaal River infrastructure program, which we would all know has been delayed for many, many years. And again, there's a need for the Department of Water Affairs and the municipality to table a plan to address this issue and to bring it to conclusion. Chair, on higher education, look, I think we must appreciate as COSATU that government had to reprioritize funding given the many, many crises it's facing. But we are worried about the cut of 1.3 billion rand given to university infrastructure projects. This is worrying given the backlog of student accommodation, which we all know about, but also that there's going to be probably a need to expand the size of classrooms to adjust for social distancing as we learn to live with the pandemic going forward. But we do want to welcome the 90 million rand for the employment of junior lecturers through the Presidential Employment Program. Chair, there's a 429 million rand allocated to the National Youth Development Agency for employment opportunities. We hope that this money will be spent well. It will not be abused. We have raised concerns about the NYDA previously, but we do want to wish the new NYDA board, which is many credible young people, and hope they can really turn the ship around. But there needs to be a close watch of the NYDA by Parliament to make sure that really does turn the corner in this term. Chair, just getting to the end, I think we want to appreciate in other departments the allocation of 250 million to the environmental affairs for the Presidential Employment Program and similar allocations of 750 million for agriculture, tourism, 159 million. These are all under the Presidential Employment Program. These will really make a huge difference, especially the 750 million for the Department of Agriculture. We do want to appreciate the 138 million for small business development and for township and rural entrepreneurship. Chair, just the last department is around COGTA. I think members would know much better than we would know about the many painful reports from the Auditor General about the dysfunctionality of local government across the country. There's very little on the MTBPS about what is government's plan to fix this. And I think that's something which really needs to be addressed going forward in a much more significant way. We know the Minister of Finance has given instructions to the municipalities in that regard, but we really want to hear what are the precise interventions that will be undertaken. But we do want to welcome the allocation of 284 million rand for the Presidential Employment Program. So yeah, in conclusion, Chair, I think we want to kind of end off there, but we do hope that in February we'll really see a budget which will really ensure that we stimulate the economy and support job creation to build upon some of these job creation interventions that we've seen here, to extend relief to the unemployed, to really see how can we ramp up the fight against corruption, wasteful expenditure, and much more clear interventions around rebuilding SOEs in the state, and of course to respect collective bargaining. But I think we are running out of time. Our workers, our members, voters at large, we've seen are losing faith in governments and its policies and commitments, and we are simply running out of time. We have 2 years into the next elections. Voters don't want to hear more promises, they want to see more action. But let me stop there, Comrade Chair, and hopefully I stuck to the time limit. So, thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Comrade Matthew. I think you'll pardon me because I did indicate that my internet is unstable. So when I open the video, it's shaky. So I'm avoiding to be cut off. Thank you so much, Matthew. Where do we go from now? While we're still waiting for the other presenters, I think we need to give Matthew another opportunity to give us an overview of the presentation from Pop Crew. Comrade Matthew, are you able to do that, please?
Sure. My apologies for commentary that was sent quite late to the committee. We received it quite late. I think we have always tried to encourage, I'll be just 2 minutes on it. We've tried to always encourage affiliates to raise specific concerns around different departments because they have much more greater granular detail. So I think PopCrew, which basically it's a COSATU affiliate which organizes in the police service and the correctional services. It has about 156,000 members, so it's the majority union there. I think the points was one was I think they appreciate the allocations given during this budget to police to help restore law and order during the violence, to also help assist government maintaining law and order during the disaster management regulations. So I think there was an appreciation on that front. But I think the key kind of concerns they were raising, Honorable Chair, was the declining police headcount ratio to members of the public. The United Nations has spoken to 1 to 220 persons, but in South Africa, our rate is almost double that. It's 1 to 413 persons. We've also seen that the number of police officers has been declining throughout this period. And this is despite a commitment by the president in SONA last year to employ additional 7,000 police personnel. There's actually, the opposite has happened. 7,000 personnel have actually left, passed away, been dismissed, etc. over the past year. There is a commitment, I think, for the next financial year to hire an additional 10,000 police officers. We hope that will happen. But of course, there's also the issue of ensuring the police stations are properly resourced, vehicles are resourced, etc. I think part of the problem, Comrade Chair, is that in the police, the structures often are bloated at top. You have too many police officers deployed to head office, provincial offices, to desk jobs, not enough deployed to community, visible policing or specialized units, etc. And there's a need to invest in more skills, etc. I think on the correctional services front, Honorable Chair, I think there was a welcoming of some of the additional resources given to correctional services to try to reinforce it during this COVID-19 period. Obviously, correctional services hosting over 200,000 prisoners and largely overcrowded facilities is a health risk. Many correctional service officers actually succumbed to COVID-19, but I think there has been appreciation about trying to address it. But still, I think what we're seeing there, Chair, is that there is a need to really invest in the infrastructure capacity of correctional services, especially on the security front. There's a problem around perimeters, fencing, etc., a problem of overcrowding. That really is making it difficult to maintain law and order within the prisons itself, let alone to focus on the rehabilitation of the inmates, so that when they leave prisons, they can become employed and become constructive members of society, not become repeat offenders, which normally does happen. So I think that's it in a nutshell, Honorable Chair. Just a very high level summary there, PopCrew's submission. But thanks very much, Comrade Chair.
Thank you very much, Comrade Matthew. Lubabalo, the other presenters here? Not yet.
Yes, no, yes, Chairperson, Sasha has joined the platform, Chair, about to share their slides, Chairperson, and then she will take the committee through their submission.
Okay. You're welcome, colleagues. Can you please take over and make your presentation, Sasha?
Hi, thank you, Chair.
Okay. You can
Thank
go
you very
on.
much. Brilliant. Thank you, Chair. I just want to open by saying this presentation and this submission have been endorsed by about 28 organizations. So there is very high, representation in terms of numbers. So as a first point.
Hello, Chair.
Yes, Lubabalo. Lubabalo?
Hello, Chair. I think I'm a lot, Chairperson.
I can't hear you. Lubabalo, what's your intervention?
Recording stopped.
Lubabalo?
Lubabalo's fallen off the system, Chair. His network is also low.
Did you hear what he said?
Recording in
I think
progress.
I'm-
I think Lubabalo is back on the platform, Chairperson. Lubabalo.
Hello, Chairperson. Sorry, Chairperson and honorable members. It looks like I thought it was the Chairperson network that was acting up, only to realize later on that it's my network this side and I was kicked out, but I'm back, Chairperson. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's a virus. It goes around. What were you saying, Babalo? You wanted to make an intervention.
No, Chairperson. Earlier on, I was saying you were breaking up a lot, but then it might happen that it was my signal this side rather than yours on that side. But I was trying to draw that to your attention, Chairperson. I did not realize that my signal was poor at that moment.
May I continue, Honorable Chair?
Yes, please. You may continue. My apologies about that.
No problem. Thank you so much. So this budget submission is made by hashtag People's Budget, and our comrade who's presenting with me, Comrade Esther Romani, will introduce the group a little bit. I just want to make 2 points right at the very beginning. As we represent about 28 diverse groups, which all represent multiple stakeholders, I would appreciate if we are given proper time to properly present our presentation. And then the second point that I want to make really strongly is that I want to be clear that while all of these organizations are endorsing the content of this work, this participation doesn't necessarily mean that any of these organizations or hashtag People's Budgets are legitimizing this process, because we feel like this process is very much reduced to a checkbox exercise and doesn't really constitute proper public participation. So we are trying to expand, the group and the space who are engaging and pushing with this process for public finance in South Africa more generally to become more democratically constituted. So just to make a very strong point about that at the start, and then I will hand over to my comrade Esther Romani to open.
Good morning, Honorable Chair, comrades in Parliament, and all those who are watching or listening in. My name is Esther Ramani, and I am a member of the hashtag Code Red Feminist Collective, which has initiated this collaborative submission as a response to the 2021 MTBPS adjusted estimates of national expenditure. This is the first time that a group of people so diverse in composition have met to submit a response. And for us, it is important that we use this opportunity as a democratic process in which budget advocacy amongst the public brings about public participation in budget decisions. I'm sorry that we only got to learn yesterday that we have to make presentations today. So our slides are just a repetition of what is in the submission, but I would urge you to read the submission fully and at the moment just listen to what we have to say. So the first thing I would like to focus on is the fact that even though there has been this call for the public to participate, it is quite regretful that only 3 groups are participating in this national call for submissions. So it shows that even though we do have this tool of budget advocacy, it is still not widespread enough to bring in all sectors of our people. I would like to move on now to a basic education, which is vote 16 in the AENE. As we all know and have known for decades, South Africa has one of the most unequal education systems in the world. It is shocking to learn that in 2021, not one single public school in the country received home language workbooks for learners from grades 1 to 6. So we would imagine that these materials would have been ready to send on to the schools, public schools, by the end of 2019, which is before the pandemic started. This is a horrible state of affairs for our country, as we know that in all the international tests of literacy and numeracy, South Africa comes last. And this has been the story for the last 2 decades. So no matter how much money we put into education, as long as we do not have proper training of teachers, proper training in materials production, an efficient curriculum, a way of distributing materials in a timely way to learners and teachers, we are not going to achieve even a minimum standard of quality education for our children in the public schools. What is even more alarming is that, as we know from grades 1 to 3 or 1 to 4, the medium of instruction and assessment is the home language of the child. And if home language workbooks are not supplied during these early years of schooling, it does not augur well for the rest of education starting from grade 5, where English then becomes the medium of instruction. The same story obtains for mathematics workbooks. Not a single maths workbook was supplied for grades 1 to 9 in 2020-2021. So we have 0% non-performance against a projected target of 100%. Workbooks promote independent problem solving. They give students opportunities for cognitive development, and this is what has been missing. And so this is a denial of a fundamental right of the child. In the light of this, it is quite alarming to note that 12.872 million has been taken away from curriculum implementation and monitoring. This should in fact be reinstated and increased. COSATU has already spoken about school infrastructure. We see that there's an allocation of 210 million for school infrastructure, but we realize that this is a rollover and this is money unspent. I would like to ask the question whether salaries are ever rolled over, or are they all paid in time to department officials? I do not even want to talk about the 431 million rand that was wasted by the Gauteng Department of Education on so-called deep sanitizing of schools, which was totally unnecessary. So long before COVID, we have had a history of non-performance from the Department of Basic Education. Books have been found thrown in remote places. Books have not been delivered on time. Cases of sexual abuse in schools has not received the urgent response that it needs. So all of this is very, very disheartening. Then finally, on basic education, we see a decrease in funding. This has been pointed out by the Budget Justice Coalition. the funding for basic education has decreased from 1.7% in 2019-2020 to minus 8.6% in 2023-24. So we call for increased progressive funding for this frontline and key sector, but more importantly, we call for the efficient utilization of these funds and accountability from those who have failed to use these funds in an ethical and productive way. I now move on to vote 17, which is higher education and training. As we know, the economy of a country depends upon high quality graduates and postgraduates, including doctorates. This is fundamental to our socio-economic development. However, with unemployment rate now touching 40% among the youth, we have a situation where we have highly qualified graduates and postgraduates working as spectral attendants. This is totally unacceptable. So we have a situation where we are producing graduates and diploma holders whose skills are mismatched with the needs of the labor market. Our universities are busy preparing people for a competitive global economy, and there is nothing wrong with that, but there seems to be very little focus on producing graduates who are in tune with the needs of their communities and who can be engaged in productive, stimulating programs which uplift themselves and their communities. Right now in higher education, there have been many conferences on multilingualism and on community engagement and service learning programs. Both of these have been seen as crucial components of a decolonized curriculum, which promotes indigenous languages and their dissemination. However, the Treasury seems to be unaware of the current debates and conversations taking place in higher education, and therefore does not address any of these in its budget proposals. Similarly, vocational education and training, or TVET colleges, have had a long history of non-performance and neglect. And we know that it is these TVET colleges that provide the technicians and artisans so sorely needed to rebuild our infrastructure and our economy. So the vote 17 on higher education and training it has been given a good budget, but we would also expect from Parliament and the Treasury some ideas, creative and stimulating ideas on how this funding should be used. I now move on to vote 41, which is water and sanitation. At the moment, I live in Makhanda in the Eastern Cape, and here we get water every other day. There are communities in Joza and the neighboring townships who have not had water for... Sorry, is there an intervention? Sorry,
sorry, Sasha, you can continue.
No, this is not Sasha. This is Esther Ramani.
Oh, Esther.
Yes,
sorry about that. Somehow my mic was unmuted. Sorry.
No, that's all right. So I was beginning to talk about water and sanitation, which comes under vote 41 of the MTBPS, or rather the AENE 2021. I was saying that I live in Makhanda in the Eastern Cape, and here the richer parts of the country, the more developed parts of the city, receive water every other day, and people in the townships and rural areas have no water for over 5 or 7 days. So one of the problems is that there is a huge infrastructure backlog, and both large regional bulk water projects and small regional infrastructure projects have not been completed on schedule. Many of the figures contradict the claim made in the AENE that more small projects than expected were completed through the Water Services Infrastructure Grant. In Makanda, the infrastructure development was to begin 10 years ago, and to this day, the old water pipes have not been replaced, and tenders have been awarded to people who are not equal to the task, and several tender processes are flawed and even nepotistic. So I'm going to stop at this point and hand over to my comrade, Sasha Knox, who will talk about the other votes in our submission. Sasha, are you there?
Yes, thank you, comrade. Brilliant. I just want to start by giving a shout out to all of the queers for economic justice, both globally and in South Africa, and just make a strong point that I am queer and non-binary. So if any questions are addressed to me, to please not use she as a pronoun. I use they, their, or them. I'm going to now talk about health, and I'll be running through the rest of the votes that these 28 different groups have supported and endorsed the comment on. Okay. So one of the analyses already provided, in relation to the MTBPS has been the analysis generated by Section 27, and that shows that health spending is actually set to decline in real terms by a massive 13.7% over the MTEF. I want to make very clear to anyone maybe watching this on the YouTube or tuning in from outside that all of these slides, the submission, the resources, they break down some of the implications of budget allocations for the MTEF, which is a projection of 3 financial years. So this does have, ongoing implications in terms of public fiscal planning. This is about the management and resources of public financing. So to please just urge people who maybe missed things in the presentation to go and consult these resources. As far as I know, they will be published and be made available. And please use them for your advocacy. There's an analysis of quite a lot of different sectors. So the Section 27 analysis shows that there's massive decline in health spending over the MTEF. And that's really concerning at a time when we absolutely need to be strengthening our health systems as a part of providing essential social support, which frankly at this point needs to extend well beyond simplistic cash transfers when we look at the very severe context of poverty and unemployment in South Africa. So it's incredibly worrying as well that there's 160 million in declared unspent funds within the department. This basically means that these funds are cut from the department. These funds do not get rolled over. This underspending means this money is cut from the department. So we've said that wastage of public finance from within the vote needs to urgently be addressed with clear accountability for what the failures are, as well as necessary measures for redress. Very concerning is that there has been, a really notable decrease in the number of patients receiving antiretroviral treatments. And while this might be in part, attributable to the COVID-19 pandemic, it's absolutely unacceptable. Emergency response and health system strengthening really need to be better aligned rather than the one sacrificed for the other. yeah, this is really very regressive in terms of incredibly hard-won victories for those in South Africa with HIV and AIDS. It needs to urgently be addressed because it also very negatively impacts on our quadruple burden of disease, including TB. Yeah, and then the next point is on the national health insurance.
I'm sorry, Sasha. Sorry about that. Are you still on this slide that is on the screen? Because I think you have been speaking for a long time. We can't follow your.
Yes, I am. Would you like me to share my screen and go through the slides myself?
I thought you are controlling them. I don't know who's controlling them.
I'm not.
So that we can follow what you're talking to. Please.
I am on that slide. I will say when to turn them on the bottom points where you see National Health Insurance NHI in bold.
Yeah, now we are on vote 18 health, and you have been there for quite some time.
Yes, well, health is quite important in South Africa. I'm sure you will agree.
I do. I don't argue the importance of the health matter. I'm just saying, even up there, you stood on a slide for a long time. If you can help us to follow what you are presenting, so that we are in the same power with you. Thank you.
I'm on the first slide, vote 18 health, on the last point in relation to national health insurance. The point there is that investing in national health insurance is a very economically strategic way to target rising inequality, which is very important in times of so-called fiscal constraints. So it's highly concerning that we see a 310 million rand cut from health financing and national health insurance. And it's incredibly regressive in a context where NHI needs to be prioritized. You can switch to the next slide, health continued. The purpose of the Department of Health is leading and coordinating health services to promote the health of all people in SA through accessible, caring, and high-quality health system based on the primary health care approach. Now, this is relevant because primary health care is said to be so important to our health system in South Africa. We've already determined that the Department of Health needs to base their approach on a primary health care approach. However, despite this, in the ANE, there are worrying cuts to primary health care, as well as 100 million cut from district health services, which is really concerning because district health services should be strengthened as the front line for primary health care in South Africa. We strongly affirm the need for the professionalization of community health workers, and believe that indicators that prioritize community health workers should be worked into the department's activities. We see basically in the ANE that there is a clearly unacceptable de-resourcing of hospital systems, the national health insurance and primary health care. And we say that increased allocations are urgently required to national health insurance and primary health care in particular. And we also state that introducing a primary health care conditional grant might be a good measure to strengthen primary health care in the country. Okay, if you will move on to vote 20, women, youth, and persons with disabilities. Comrade Chair.
Yes, I can see it.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Okay, so the first thing of massive concern is that the performance indicators for this department are radically inadequate. We've even put sick here in the title to comment that women spelt MEN is quite a regressive concept of cisnormative gender. So when we use women, we underscore where the N would be, and that's a more gender inclusive terminology for women. which of course the department should be looking at adopting. But the massive thing is that the performance indicators are radically inadequate. And that's really shocking when we realize that these very few and very limited actions, you know, kind of 4 or 5 targets on each indicator, are the full extent of state engagement on the empowerment of the most marginalized groups in South Africa, somehow still strangely backed by a budget of 1.195 billion. So we do say that the targets and indicators need radical revision through a public consultation process. And we note with absolute outrage that there are currently no specific indicators addressing the needs of LGBTQI+ people in South Africa. This must urgently be incorporated directly into the work of the department. We see several cuts within the department that we believe will severely exacerbate severe levels of inequality and gender-based violence. That includes a 6.1 million cut from social transformation and economic empowerment. You may go to the next slide, Comrade Chair. From policy, stakeholder coordination and knowledge management, there's a 3.2 million rand cut. And from the rights of persons with disabilities, which we find completely outrageous, is a 1.3 million cuts. And this is particularly outrageous in the context where people with disabilities have had severe lack of access to being able to access even the social relief of distress grants, as well as the disability grants during the COVID-19 pandemic. So yeah, again, where we do see new intervention in the department, it's 430 million. And again, as with most new allocations within the AE&E, this is for the new big branded kind of presidential employment intervention. We are concerned that investments in the presidential employment intervention are not new spend. When we say that this much money is going to the presidential employment intervention, that's sometimes misleading because we're not talking about new spend. A lot of that money is reprioritized, which means that it is moved from one area of the budget to the PEI. And some of the cuts above, you know, are examples of the kind of cuts that are being made, you know, now to fund the Presidential Employment Initiative. It's definitely something that we will need to watch closely because we're not yet assured of its success. And it seems to be operating out of a lot of the infrastructure that has already failed to deliver on creating employment in this country. So we also ask the questions whether or not the groups who have been directly affected by cuts that are now going towards the PEI, whether they were consulted at all in this process of making direct cuts to frontline interventions. And we also question how women and people with disabilities, also how LGBTQI+ people will be integrated into that presidential employment intervention. Again, with the Budget Justice Coalition, we affirm that you know, to achieve gender equality, it is crucial that fiscal sustainability prioritizes transforming gender relations through an intersectional feminist budget, and that the revision, resourcing, and implementation of a national strategic plan on GBV, VF, and femicide needs urgent prioritization. It is essential that indicators around these priority areas be urgently developed. Moving on to vote 28, police. Total allocations to this vote are particularly high. So much so that this vote is 268.5% higher than the total amount given to basic education. I think our police sector is also more highly funded, potentially, I stand to be corrected, than our Department of Defense, which is quite telling in terms of a society that is quite heavy-handed in terms of its police force in a way which can increase the vulnerability of the most marginalized people in this country. So we have seen, you know, very high allocations for increased deployment of police personnel, Some of this has been in relation to the recent unrest. But we worry that this mobilization, without necessary checks and balances, can really increase the vulnerability of the most marginalized. The shocking fact of the matter is that, levels of rape by police and while in police custody are so severe in this country that our independent police investigative directorate actually has 2 targets specifically related to this, and that's 2 out of its, entire 6 targets. So it's incredibly worrying that there's a massive increased police force being mobilized, and when targets related to the prosecution of rapes, show a complete lack of prosecution and accountability. There needs to be, kind of more increased measures such as human rights monitoring, collaborative work with community organizations, labor unions, people on the ground, to ensure protection at these times. There's been a severe rollover within the departments of 1 billion. I mean, 1 billion is massively, massively bigger than 1 million. If you kind of write out 1 million and 1 billion, you can see the massive difference represented visually. But this shows a severe lack of adequate performance, and there needs to be immediate investigation into the poor spending performance of this vote, with clear ameliorative measures being developed for implementation. Just to go on to vote 28, police continued, and to wrap it up quite quickly, there are very severely low rates for detection rates for crimes against women and children, and there need to be specific indicators for hate crimes against the LGBTQI+ community. There are very concerning performance indicators around a failure to intervene in organized crime and a failure to address crime network operations. And this lack of ability of the South African police force to intervene in organized crime needs to urgently be addressed. We also recommend that this vote be significantly defunded, with those funds being redirected towards important and required measures for restorative justice, which again should be democratically developed. To move on to vote 29, agriculture, land reform and rural developments. Again, we find the performance of this department completely outrageous. Only 2.8% of the target towards number of subsistence and smallholder producers supported per year was achieved. Only 4.1% in terms of number of hectares of strategically located land acquired per year was achieved. Only 29.6%. It's shocking that this looks like an achievement in the context of the very low performance otherwise. Has been achieved on number of land claims finalized. Absolutely shocking performance, and 10%, only 10% has been achieved towards number of infrastructure projects completed to directly support farmers. We find this outrageous in a context of very severe inequality and food security, with problems of food security causing some commentators to dub recent complex unrest as the food riots. So it's very concerning that there are absolutely no gender specific indicators to track performance or impact in relation to agriculture, land reform and rural development in South Africa. We need gender specific targets within this vote. And we also note that women and youth are highly vulnerable groups who are concentrated at the rural level, and thus we insist that allocations towards the rural are significantly increased in order to provide necessary social assistance and protection. We agree with the Budget Justice Coalition, moving on to the next slide, that gender equity must be prioritized through urgent increased allocations to pro-poor land and agrarian reform, by ensuring that every worker earns a living wage, and by investing in the informal economy. We recommend that these 3 critical areas for gender equity be prioritized and integrated into the activities, indicators, and targets of the department. We are highly concerned that 18 million has been cut from land redistribution and tenure reform, and that another 18 million has been directly cut from restitution. A massive 43.6 million is cut from rural development, specifically from the program for rural infrastructure developments. We say that these cuts constitute an active dispossession of rural communities from their land rights, and is similar to the state's development of the Traditional and Khoisan Leadership Act 3 of 2019, in evidencing a drive to keep colonial and apartheid structures intact and to re-entrench the problematic geography of the Bantustans. We strongly reject this. We believe that the neglect in this critical vote is absolutely unacceptable, and severely exacerbates a lack of progress towards a truly equitable South Africa. We demand the increased prioritization of both the rural and the pro-poor land and of pro-poor land and agriculture reform, mapped out in clear processes of system strengthening for this vote. To move on to transport, just before I conclude, and I thank you for your patience, we note that the transport system in South Africa is plagued by very severe and substantial structural challenges. We've listed some of those there. That includes a transport system that repeatedly puts commuters' lives at risk. Despite the importance and the absolute necessity of transport for creating necessary socioeconomic developments in South Africa, we see a massive 1.34 billion declared in underspending on the public network transport grants. And some of the earlier presenters picked up on this in relation to the My City Bus rapid transit system. But that's absolutely unacceptable mismanagement and poor performance that urgently needs to be addressed. We're also incredibly worried about the low indicators being met around the maintenance and upgrading of transport infrastructure, as well as a massive disinvestment in existing and newly created transport systems. Both the lack of increased funding to this vote and the active disinvestments from earmarked projects will undoubtedly force a decline on the substantial returns that could be realized through adequate investments in transport. With the establishment of accessible and affordable public transport systems being an absolutely essential component of vitally required development, we need to see the strengthening of this vote's allocations and efficiencies. There must be no compromise on achieving an efficient and effective quality transport system in South Africa. I will now hand over to my comrade Esther Ramani again, to wrap up with the conclusion and to also display on the screen our various endorsers, over 28 different groups, which have substantively engaged with the content of the submission and support it, while, as I said in the beginning, very clearly not legitimizing and necessarily endorsing this process, because we find a lot of problems in that process, in relation to various, previous submissions that have been made to different committees. Groups such as the Budget Justice Coalition have repeatedly pointed this out, for example. So, now to hand over to my comrade Esther Ramani to wrap up.
Hi, Sasha. As you head over to your comrade, please mind the time. I think we have had enough time. You have eaten much on the time. Please, just 2 minutes on the conclusion at the maximum, please.
Understood, Comrade Chair. Esther Ramani, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Comrade Sacha, for your presentations. I want to start by acknowledging the contribution of Matsepo Kekana. I've been asked to start my video, so here goes. So I have been asked, I've started my video. Okay, so I want to acknowledge the contribution of Matsepo Anna. Her absence here is a commentary on how erratic our Wi-Fi system is, that somebody who was so central to this process, a strong Black female voice, is not present during this submission. I will not take more time, but let me just say that this budget is an underwhelming budget. Though there are clear allocations to many votes, it is not characterized by a sense of urgency that the people of South Africa feel. This is not a pro-poor budget. As stated by the finance minister, he said it's a pro-poor budget, but it is not. The most vulnerable are still left to fend for themselves. There is tremendous talent in this country, incredible people who have done a lot of work over the years on a people's budget, and we believe that government should consult them, bring them to the table, and discuss how we can lift South Africa out of the morass that it is in. Several organizations have supported us. Some of the logos can be seen on the last slide, and we thank all of them for their endorsement. And we do believe that we have started on a democratic process of public participation in budget decisions. Thank you again, Madam Chair, for permitting us to make this presentation, and we hope it will receive your thoughtful consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, comrades, on your presentation. Very important issues that we have raised, very relevant. But as you were presenting, we were listening, processing, and some of the issues are the issues that this committee have been raising that are relevant to appropriations. But I'll hear to the members on how do we take your issues forward. And while I'm addressing the comrades who have made presentations, I will request members to raise their hand. Those who want to have clarity seeking questions or engage on the two presentations, that of Comrade Sasha and Comrade Matthew. But before then, there is something that I think caught the attention of the committee. And as a committee, I think we have a responsibility to respond or clarify it or acknowledge it, because it is well within your space or your ambit to raise it with us where we are not doing well. I'll request Secretary Committee or Mr. Notata to attend to the issue of time and publications, whether have we done what we usually do in terms of inviting the public for participation. I see the hand of Honorable Ryder. Estelle, you can help me in the meantime, or okay, let's wait until Notata is done. Go on.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Chairperson, and to the members and the committee at large. Also, thank you to the colleagues for making their presentations. Chairperson, I would like to clarify the issue of public participation, what we did up to now. Chair, on between 18 and 26 November 2021, we placed adverts in print media newspapers. The newspapers that we used are the following. The advert was in isiXhosa, which was placed on the 18th of November. Business Day, the advert was in English, and the advert was placed on the 19th of November. Business Link, the advert was in Setswana, and it was placed 19th of November. Bushbuck Ridge News, The advert was in Chitsonga, and it was placed on the 19th of November. Free State Sun, the advert was in Sesotho, and it was placed on the 19th of November. Burger, the advert was in Afrikaans, and it was placed on the 20th of November. Tembelihle, the advert was placed in Isindebele, and it was placed on the 26th of November. Isolezwe, the advert was in isiZulu, it was placed on the 21st of November. Ngoho News, the advert was in Chivenda, and it was placed on the 26th of November. In Tavela newspaper, the advert was in Tetedi, and it was placed on the 26th of November. Whole City, the advert was in Setswana, and it was placed on the 26th of November. But prior to the placement of these adverts, on the 16th of November, I received an email from Sasha inquiring about this process. I emailed to her on the 16th of November, prior to the placement of the adverts, a copy of the English version detailing when we're going to have public hearings on the division of revenue, the closing date, and also the second bullet there detailed when we're going to have public hearings on the adjustment appropriation bill and the date, which was last week on Friday, and public hearings today. Yesterday, during our communication, this matter was raised. I clarified it. I reminded her about our communique, and I thought the matter was resolved because she acknowledged that we communicated about this, myself and her. Yeah, Chairperson, I did not anticipate that we were to find ourselves in this situation, but I thought, Chair, let me clarify this matter, and that's it. I hope, Chairperson, this matter is not going to cloud this important exercise of the as mandated by Section 72 of the Constitution, Chairperson. My ending is that we did all that we could. Unfortunate that it has been raised now in this platform after we so much
Madam Chair, may I speak? This is Esther Ramani. I'm using my partner's laptop. That's why his name appears there. But Madam Chair, may I speak?
Sorry, comrades, yourself and comrade Sasha, can I allow you to respond to these issues as members also are raising? I'm going to give them an opportunity to raise issues that they seek clarity on so that we don't cause dialogue.
Madam Chair.
I see Sasha's hands is also up. So I wanted to clarify this matter. If there's still something that you want to raise on the matter, raise it after members also have had their say on the matter, please.
Madam Chair, I just want to say that, you know, it's probably maybe a bit of a waste of time to have a lot of people inputting, you know, without just some clarity from my side. And that would be that I did actually get the dates incorrect. I had seen on the adverts the 10th of December highlighted, and it was my mistake. So I did let our larger group know quite late about the presentation process, which Comrade Esther commented on. But the point is still that this process is, you know, massively inefficient and insufficient. You know, it would have.
Comrade Sasha, my apologies. I think the point that you are making, it was going to be relevant to raise it, motivate it as you are when your time comes. You have made your point, but the motivation, you can deal with it, the last part when your time comes. Let me allow members to speak on the matter. Just hold on for a second. Thank you. I see Honorable Ryder, Honorable Karim. Who else?
Those are the two hands so far, Chairperson.
Thank you. Honorable Ryder.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, I've adjusted my camera so it's nice and appropriate. So yes, I'll continue and I'll have my camera on. Thank you for the presentations. And again, I think at this juncture, it really is worth, I think, appreciating specifically COSATU, but both presentations. I think that the work that is done consistently by COSATU to do an in-depth drilling into these fairly technical things is much appreciated, and it certainly helps us to do our work. So thank you for the inputs and for the questions and the comments and the highlights that both presentations have raised. I think that COSATU's presentation I'll start with. And again, as we've seen with many of the presentations, there's a huge amount of value and practicality in COSATU's presentation. Lots of comments that I liked, lots that I agreed with, a couple of policy issues I disagree with. But I think that, you know, in terms of economic principles, most of what COSATU raised is absolutely bang on the money. I wanted to pull out on the DTI analysis that you had specifically going into the DTI thing. You welcomed the allocation for critical infrastructure spending, and I just think that you know, I want to disagree with that quite strongly, because I think that 200 million for critical infrastructure in an environment when we've been told that we're going to have an infrastructure-led economic recovery is just sending the wrong signal. It's hopelessly inadequate. So I just want to pick that one out. But also then to from the same section to talk about manufacturing and the fact that you highlighted the fact that the the contributions towards encouraging manufacturing are starting to go away. So I mean, we're talking about reindustrializing the country, but now we are not disincentivizing, but certainly not putting our money where our mouth is in terms of the in terms of the budgetary process. I wanted to agree with your comments along the wage bill and the fact that the senior managers packages really need to be re-looked at. Regarding your comments on Cape Town, I think I absolutely agree with what you were saying, that Metro Rail has been almost obliterated, and I do think that Metro Rail would do so much better if it was incorporated in the city, and that I think was what you were getting at, is saying, the city should have spent or directed the money to Metro Rail, and I absolutely agree. I think that Cape Town has been pushing to have Metro Rail incorporated into the local government sphere, rather than leaving it in where it is now, where it's not getting the correct localized inputs that are needed. Because I mean, and yeah, Mr. Parks, you've also been around the interesting areas of Cape Town like I have, and that the majority of people catching the Metro Rail trains are not in a position to afford my city transport, and also not in the my city areas of capture. Now, I hear you'll probably say, well, look, let's expand my city as well. But the fact is that Metro Rail, if it's properly run and managed with a local knowledge, will make a massive difference. So, I think that perhaps while we're agreeing on the problem, we're probably disagreeing on the solution. But I think that certainly you yourself made a good case for shifting Metro Rail into a different sphere of government, even though I don't think you intended to do so. So yeah, and then your final conclusion, I think, was absolutely spot on, and the fact that in fact it agreed with the other presentation's conclusion that the time for dithering is now past. There's an urgency that's not being picked up by government, and if it is being picked up by government, it's not being being translated into what we're seeing in the actual budget and the money. And we all know that where the money goes is where the real change comes from. So that's the one thing. So yeah, thank you very much, COSATU, and as always, big appreciation. To the second presentation, yes, I think that I do want to agree with some of what you said. Obviously, again, there's massive policy differences, and I'm not going to pick on those. I'm not going to start a fight this time. I think we had a fight last time. I don't think it's necessary. In fact, I'm going to pick a fight. I'm going to say, if your comment about the being the most diverse organization, etc., I think you're a little bit off the mark on that, especially when you see COSATU presenting right alongside you. If you've ever seen a diverse organization, look at COSATU. And I'm not the biggest fan of COSATU and what they do, but I was previously a member of COSATU in my previous life. And I think that if one looks at the number of people that they represent and the diversity of that, you can't do much better than that. But anyway, I'm sure you will continue to vouchsafe that you are more diverse than they are, but perhaps, yes, one needs to filter some of these comments. I wanted to agree with your comments, though, about public participation, and I think that the process, Chairperson, is not up to standard. It's not up to scratch. It's not where we should be. And we've seen previously in the processing of other bills where public participation has been time and time again the reason that the president has been forced to return bills back to our house. And you know, the Constitution again certainly calls for public participation. And you know, the word tick box. The phrase tick box exercise was used, and we want to try and avoid that. Now, noted, this is the adjustment budget or the adjustment appropriation. So you know, there's some issues that perhaps needed to be more widely vented when we're going through to the main appropriation in the early part of next year. And I think that perhaps there will be a better process. We've got 1,000 excuses as to why public participation has been constrained now. We've had the local government elections, which has put us all under pressure. And certainly I think that we find ourselves in a position where we're struggling to do exactly the work that we'd like to do. But I do think our public participation processes could be improved dramatically. And again, look, I mean, I don't know. It looks like there was a bit of a ball drop between the two, but certainly I think that if the committee secretariat can keep a database and build up a database of our regular commentators and encourage them via an email or something. I'm sure you do that already, but I'm perhaps just emphasizing the point, you know, encourage the usual suspects to come forward, because whether we agree or disagree with them, that's not the point. The point is they must have their voice and they must be given a platform. This is the People's Parliament. So yes, build that database and have direct interactions with them rather than putting things in the newspaper. I'm not sure how many people buy newspapers anymore, but yes, let's try and focus ourselves on that. I appreciated the comment. So yes, the basic education comments I think were largely well put forward, and I liked a lot of the inputs. Again, some policy disagreement, but that's fine. I loved your comment about salary rollovers, and I mean it's a point I made in the debate last week, is that you know, one always sees that the salaries are 100% paid. And yet one doesn't see that targets are met, and all monies are well spent, but the salary is always the ones that are spent. I think Sasha also picked up on the issues around the fact that you know, 10% of your target meeting, that really is something that needs to be seriously taken up. If people are drawing their full salaries but only achieving 10% of their goals, there needs to be a tree shaken to see what falls out. But yes, on those rollover issues, and I think COSATU also picked it up. Certainly, I mean, we've spoken several times about the VAL water and sanitation rollover. And obviously, you know, with me being where I am and who I am, the VAL is obviously front of mind. But there's a couple of other interesting rollovers that people haven't specifically spoken to. And perhaps I think that it would be nice to get a little bit more detail around, Chairperson. You know, there's an agricultural land reform and rural development rollover of 243 million, R1 billion on police, 210 million on basic education, and 412 million on Stats South Africa. I think I understand the Stats South Africa one, but you know, if we can just get some clarity from Treasury on that. Yeah, and then the effectiveness of our spending, the fact that money is being spent. I think this was highlighted again throughout the presentation, the second presentation, to say that you know, the effectiveness of our spending is not there. The money is being spent, but it's being spent on the wrong things. So again, Chair, those are my inputs. I think more comments than questions. But yeah, again, appreciation to both groups for presenting.
Thank you, Honorable Ryder. Thank you very much. Honorable Karim.
Yeah, hi, Chairperson. Sorry, I have communicated to you and Lubabalo my situation, that I'll be in and out, unfortunately. To deal essentially with the last submission. So firstly, perhaps we should communicate that we, as the ANC and most parties to some or other degree, support obviously the rights and interests of LGBTQ+ communities. In fact, only yesterday, you'll recall, Chair, in doing our report on the tax bills, this matter was raised about the use of they and recognizing multiple identities in the same person. So I don't think there's any issue about that. Where there is an issue is to what extent we are allocating resources to create greater awareness in our society about the legitimate issues that, you know, we need to address in this area. So, I mean, basically, I don't think there's any disagreement with the broad perspectives they set out, but clearly we need to do more. And we thank them for bringing this more forthrightly to our attention. But they will probably know also that we were quite advanced in the first term of Parliament with our gender budgeting and so on. And that has begun to fade. And every now and then, you'll recall, Chairperson, we are raising it, that what has happened to gender budgeting. But now there's a broader set of issues that they're raising, Chairperson, that we need to apply our mind to, and we need to engage with Treasury about. On the matter of public, I'll come back to some issues there. On the matter of public participation, I'm not sure whether they made a submission to the National Assembly, but just to draw their attention to this, and I'm not sure what the response of the NA was, but just to draw their attention to this. This is the last stage, if you like, of the process. And perhaps they should be aware, they may well be, that it's quite a complicated process by which you process the budget. It's the medium-term budget policy statement, obviously. Linked to that is the fiscal framework. Linked to that is the division of revenue, which we've just adopted this week, and flowing from that is the appropriations adjustments. So it's not as if this is the only tranche or part of the complicated process we have. In fact, in some senses, our process is too sophisticated, Chairperson, and the Money Bills Act, which is legally prescriptive on how we do this and what we do, is perhaps too onerous for a parliament of our emerging nature. I've said this repeatedly, and I do so now. Provide some context for where public participation fits in. Then a generic point, Chairperson. We have consistently raised, you and I in the previous term, and those of us who are new since we got here in 2019 in the new committee, that public participation has waned, that we need to revitalize it and so on. But partly when we talk about public participation, we also have to accept, Chairperson, our own failure to effectively and efficiently exercise oversight. So the public is skeptical about us. So, you know, it's a broader set of issues. It's not some marginalization of the colleagues and comrades who made a submission just now. And we are trying to address those issues, but they also need to be aware that this is appropriations adjustments budget. The PFMA limits what we can do. And that's about rollovers, which they drew attention to. I like salary rollovers, Chairperson. I never heard the term before, but I'm really going to use it. I think it's entirely justified and long overdue. But, you know, we here all we've got to look at is unforeseen and unavoidable changes or events that have occurred between February when the budget's presented and now. Then we look at rollovers, and we also have to look at programs that government launched after the budget was introduced in February, which have not been budgeted for. So there's a very limited framework within which we can operate. However, what's good about this process is that it provides some guidelines to us and to Treasury about how the medium-term expenditure framework might be handled from the budget in February next year. On the matter of the specific issues here, all I can say, Chairperson, and you'll know more about this, Lubabalo and Estelle are an excellent team. They are probably among the better secretaries in this whole parliament. And, you know, Chairperson, I always tell you that Lubabalo is cut out, and maybe Estelle too, to serve in some UN bureaucracy and all, and he's so over efficient and so over technical. So I do feel that whatever happened here, we don't know the full circumstances. I would tend to think that the error, insofar as it occurred, was not deliberate or a lack of efficiency on Lubabalo and Estelle's side, and I want to reinforce my confidence in them. They have served this committee excellently. And I don't know what happened here fully, and I don't think we should go into that, but they are excellent secretaries, really. And maybe they can deal with this matter offline. There is a slightly strident tone from our comrades in civil society in regard to this matter. Maybe it reflects their frustration with us and their alienation from Parliament and where we are today. But really, Chairperson, I think Estelle and Lubabalo are excellent. We've said this 1,000 times, and they need to know this too. So really, I don't know who else is observing what's going on here, but they make the wrong impression about Lubabalo and Estelle. But perhaps you want to say something about it in fairness to them. They might have heard, but it's very, very much an aberration. Now, also to draw attention to our comrades there that, look, you know, this is not a Section 76 bill, it's a money bill, and it's dealing with appropriations adjusted at national level. We're a council of provinces. Our main preoccupation is how are the powers, functions, resources, funding, etc., of provinces that are affected in any way. And our aim is to prevent provinces losing out while recognizing that the primary role for delivery resides at national and local government level in many senses, but provinces play a crucial role, obviously, in health and education. So really, you know, it's the National Assembly where they must really struggle to get their demands, needs, and interests attended to. But obviously, we have a further secondary role to play in reviewing what the National Assembly does. Now, on the matter of LGBT+, I think in principle, I mean, the ANC's positions, the government's positions are very clear. I mentioned yesterday, Chairperson, that all new bills will speak of they. And bills that are being amended, or in other words, acts that are already there using he, stroke, she, or some similar thing that recognizes an either or identity, which are being amended, they're looking into how they can do that. But all future legislation, new bills, will in fact cover the terminology that's relevant to the times we're in. And it's really consistent with our constitution to take into account all the needs and interests of everybody. So the other thing to mention, Chairperson, is obviously these are trade-offs. In other words, often civil society actors who are oriented towards the poor and the disadvantaged and the marginalized come here and they make all sorts of demands, and we agree with them in principle, Chairperson. But these are trade-offs. If they were sitting in our position, we would hear from them what we're hearing from ourselves, most likely. Because you have to have trade-offs. That's what a budget is ultimately about. And we're still civil society activists, and in your case, Chairperson, a trade unionist. By the way, I'm stunned to hear, I must tease my friend there, Dennis. He's a member of COSATU. No wonder sometimes he seems to, surprisingly for a DA MP, echo COSATU's views. But there we are. And finally, a pleasant encounter with people I knew some years ago, Esther and Michael. Hi to you. We meet many years later in a different situation. On COSATU, Chairperson, I was in and out. I didn't hear so much of what he said. I browsed through the slide presentation. Again, I'm not going to repeat what we say 1,000 times to COSATU. He knows he's got the empathy of most of us in the ANC. Not he, the trade union federation he represents. To come back to the point, it depends what you mean by diversity, but people should be a bit cautious about making claims about how representative they are. One's not questioning the second presentation, but we get this now and then with civil society activists, this idea that somehow they're pure, and maybe they think we as MPs are impure, or whatever, they're entitled to that view. But often they make claims about their representative nature, right? And when we talk of representative nature, we also mean the racial demographics, not just gender and not just sexual identity. So maybe they want to look at that too. Because you see, Chairperson, the issue also is our country is very advanced in my view. They may disagree with me and they're entitled to. I mean, we have the right to abortion. We do not have the death penalty. We have legally instituted gay rights. Well, of course, it's true out there in practice, our people are not attuned to it, but that's my point, Chairperson. We're a developing country. We don't have the ethos of an industrialized society or the broader culture of industrialized society. I mean, culture in the broad sense, Chairperson. We're a developing country and an African country. And you know what? I think we're doing reasonably okay by those standards, though we still have a long way to go. Now, LGBTQ issues, Chairperson. You know what? It may be reasonable to say, Chairperson, you and others, those of you who come from the rural areas of this country and understand the customs and traditions better than I do, and the mood and the feelings of the majority in our country. And I won't pretend to do that. Never mind, I've been around for 5 decades in political activism, right? You know more than me how difficult it is if we're battling with the death penalty issue, abortion, and gay rights. You will recall, Chairperson, I think we were in the provinces, but I know what a battle it was with our own comrades. In theory, yes, they recognize gay rights, but many of them come from rural areas. We have to be empathetic. We have to understand that this is not Sweden. It's South Africa. And we have to balance the needs and interests of the LGBTQ+ communities with the culture we emerge from as a majority. And this will be a harder battle to fight over time than I think even gay rights. It's a big problem that we have to address. They themselves have to help, civil society, COSATU no less as well, and we have to work together. But we are far ahead, I think, of the average consciousness. Chairperson, if we had to carry out a referendum on gay rights, for example, or abortion, or even whether the death penalty should be brought back, you know what the likely outcome of that is going to be. So we have a very advanced constitution, and we're being challenged by many people, not least in our own rights. So we shouldn't, Chairperson, in my view, ever renege on those three things, nor should we ever abandon the LGBTQ+ communities. No, but we have to take that into account, that we have to move, in a way that's we are, in taking up these issues, I think the ANC is very advanced compared to where our constituencies. And we don't have to kowtow to them. We have to provide leadership, I agree. But we have to balance all this out. And it would help if they came to these meetings with people who speak isiZulu fluently, who speak Shivenda fluently, who come from these areas. It is difficult for them because often they come from communities that, you know, with due respect to Esther and so on, you know, they don't have to deal with that issue so much as middle class people, you know, away from a rural base and so on. So can people also on civil society side be a bit more understanding? Yeah, we are with you. But there are some things financially, we basically, Chairperson, you know this, right? We are basically severely stressed. And on the matter of public participation, we go around in circles with the DA and other parties, but perhaps the colleagues need to know, the comrades need to know, one, the system is very complex. And it means that, you know, if we had to expand the time, we'll have to finish probably around December 25th. And a lot of members, I don't personally, I'm not affected particularly, but one has to respect people's views. You know, it's Christmas time and so on. Secondly, it's true. Much to our surprise, the Constitutional Court decided that we must go ahead with the elections. Fine. That meant we lost chairperson. They need to know about 8 to 10 weeks, I think. Thirdly, a new minister is appointed. Instead of bringing the medium-term budget policy statement and all these bills, including the adjustments appropriations on the 2nd of November, it was the 11th of November. Apart from which we explained to them, it's a complicated process. It's a 3-step process. We only finished the tax bills yesterday. And we don't have the tax bills, we can't have the budget that they're making demands of, and rightly so. So, you know, it's true that we were challenged by the fact that the local government elections take place. But it's also true, right? It's also true that actually, you know what, we really don't know how to get out of this. The previous committee raised this thing about the need to extend the terms of parliament and so on, and that matter will need to be addressed. But it's certainly not true that somehow we're always in the squeeze. But thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Karen. And Tatem Letan.
Thank you, Chairperson. Let me acknowledge the two presentations that were presented to us. My question goes to COSATU Chairperson. I've heard them commenting about welcoming the adjustments that were made in the budget. I also heard their comments about the budget cuts. But when coming to unspent budgets, I didn't hear them saying something. I just want to find out from them, or to hear from COSATU, what is their comment about the unspent budgets that unspent budget from the municipalities? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Tatem Letsani. Before I give to the presenters, who's that? Njatu?
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
My apology, Chair, that I could not raise my hand, but good morning to all the members and the presenters. Chairperson, I think I wanted to extend the question of Honorable Molotane, just to extend it to, because and with believing that underspending, overspending, and rollovers definitely have an impact on jobs and job creation. So as the committee, we have raised this matter several times in terms of our oversight role as the committee, that this cannot be business as usual. But it will be also very interested to understand, as from a COSATU perspective, what is the thinking of COSATU around these matters? Because as the committee, we are raising our concern about municipalities, departments, and in terms of the overspending and underspendings and rollovers, that we can't no more move or business as usual in that. And then, Chairperson, my second point is I did miss out on the some part of the COSATU on the wage bill, because as we are also preparing for, we don't know what is going to happen. So just maybe if there's anything that I miss out on, how far are we now and what is the position now around the wage bill? And then lastly, Chair, is that the second presenters, the presentation was very important to highlight the different votes. So, and one will also then now, I think from a National Treasury perspective, to understand what may be the impacts on those points raised by the second presenters, so that one have just a more in-depth clarity on exactly what is the impact on this and what in the matters that was raised on the different votes. And lastly, Chair, is that the participation, public participation, I think from a committee view that we are very aware that public participation is very, very important. And then, and also now, I think currently, let's we speak of the currently situation is that with the COVID pandemic and levels that we time to time moved in, and that we maybe take in terms of the timeframes that we had to pass the budget. So I'm just raising that as a comment to in terms of the public participation. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Njatu. Sasha, I have seen that you've been raising your hand. Your time will come. Please just be patient with us and let's give members an opportunity to engage on these issues. When you speak, you'll speak on all other issues that they have raised. Honorable members, I think I've been covered mostly by issues that members have said. Just to say that I'm impressed as usual by the presentation by COSATU, whereby we can easily, or I can easily relate to what they are presenting. They identify issues that they don't agree with, but over and above that, they recommend. They present a recommendation on how best do they think this can be attended to or resolved. And most of the issues that they have raised, those are the issues that we as the committee, we have been raising, and some of them have formed part of our report to the House on Tuesday as we were presenting the Division of Revenue Adjustment Bill. So I think we are on the same path, but taking into consideration what members have said, I will then give to, before that, actually, I will give to the presenters to respond to these issues. And I'm going to request that members, as colleagues and comrades, as you are making your clarifications and inputs, please mind your time, but I'm not limiting you to suppression where you are going to be felt that you are going to feel that I'm suppressing you, not to view your opinions. But over and above that, let's accommodate each other, because we still have to give a treasury to have a say on what you have presented, because we can only do this much oversight on what Treasury has presented on, and we will only help also. Your presence is very important, because we also want to influence the budget for 2022-23 as we are awaiting February 2022 as we raise them. Some of the issues that have been raised by our comrades there, I think they will need us as the committee to resolve on inviting our sector committees, or refer these matters to the sector committees so that they can specifically deal with those issues, because those issues are very important. As much as we play our role in as far as appropriating monies and stuff, but in terms of deciding the programs and budget allocations and stuff, we need to give to our sister committees, our sector committees, to deal with them. And I will also encourage the presenters to maybe they can talk to the secretariat to help them coordinate the meeting with the sector committees, so that they can raise these important issues that affect our most vulnerable people in our communities, because they have a mandate also to deal with those issues, and they can follow on them day on day as they're mandated as the sector committees. I'm now going to request Comrade Matthew to have a say or comment on issues that have been raised directed to you. Comrade Matthew.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I saw a note in the chat from Sasha Knox asking to go first. So I'm flexible if you want to allow her to go first, Chair. Okay. Otherwise, I saw there was a note posted from a chair in the chat group from Sasha Knox asking to go first. I think she's under time pressures. So I'm happy for her to go first if you want.
That's very kind of you, Comrade Matthew. Thank you, Comrade Sasha. You can come first.
Thank you very much for the accommodation. My sincere apologies. I do have to step out shortly. So I just want to respond before that happens. I just want to say in the first place that I don't think that there is really much that is innovative in any way, with the NCOP pointing to problems of public participation. And I feel like that really constitutes, the very least in terms of engagement, with the NCOP on the content of our presentation. I did find the response fairly dismissive. So yeah, just because this is, we absolutely in South Africa are in a crisis of public participation in the budget processes. Well, we like to talk about our budget transparency and the amount of information we put, online and supposedly available to the public. Our public participation, statistics, which I assume, members here would be kind of fairly aware of, are dismally low. So what that shows is that although a lot of the information is made available, people have no idea how to engage with that information, process that information. And part of the problem of this is that the information, even in the AE&E, we explicitly point out a number of times where we see deliberately misleading statements and comments. Sometimes there will be very problematic numbers in the tables, and then the the narrative, the text below those tables doesn't mention those kind of things at all. So there are very massive problems, and just to say that there's been critique on this for years and years and years, right since the early days of BEMP, which created some of the public participation spaces which do currently exist. Also groups like Imali Yetu and Buleka Mali have pointed this out for a long time, that there's a lack of real meaningful public participation. And then also to go on to the NCOP speaker's comments, around diversity. I think the point is that there are differences. We do not claim to be as representative of the people as a labor union would ever be. But there is a difference between a very well-resourced labor union who in all likelihood, even probably has someone specifically staffed and paid to generate and look at these budget submissions, and often we do see it's the same comrades. So to point that out, and to also point out, I think I'm with the Workers' and Socialist Party, and I think that a lot of the labor unions are hesitant to become more involved in these direct submission processes because it is such a checkbox exercise. And what we mean when we say checkbox exercise, it's not just a term, but it means that the input that we provide in this kind of space doesn't really have any ability to make an impact or a change in the decisions that have already been made. So rather than a democratic process where people are involved in actually making decisions around what the allocations, that are made with the public purse, with public finance, this is the money of the people, what those decisions actually are. So those are a couple of things. I think then I want to move on to Honorable Karim's comments. The first thing, sorry, I'm just trying to organize my thoughts for a second. I think it's outrageous to say that we are doing reasonably okay by kind of vaguely referencing the progress that we, think we intend to achieve. The Honorable Karim also says that we have not abandoned the LGBTQI plus community, and made a lot of reference to, the fact that spending needs to happen better in relation to LGBTQI community. I mean, what's so shocking about this AE&E and what we want everyone out there to know is that there are absolutely no indicators for the LGBTQI plus community in the AE&E. That means that no votes, meaning no departments, are specifically addressing these areas, and meaning that there are no allocations currently going towards the prioritization of this area. When this is a fact, when this is an indisputable fact, an absolutely outrageous fact, we absolutely cannot say that we have not abandoned the LGBTQI plus community. We have absolutely abandoned the LGBTQI plus community. And I'm sure an analysis of Home Affairs would reveal something similar, but unfortunately our capacity was restrained in terms of specifically looking at that vote or that department. I want to say again, picking up on Karim's language, he was talking about, these kind of sophisticated processes that need to happen in terms of budget allocations. No, actually, we can see the numbers very clearly, and there's nothing sophisticated happening here when there's absolutely nothing happening in relation to the queer community, trans community, etc. in South Africa. And I want to make another point that this kind of gay rights issue is not some add-on issue in the way that the speaker kind of implied. It's not some separate issue or some side issue which people supposedly in spaces, wouldn't understand and wouldn't get. I find that implication incredibly neo-colonial and, potentially fairly racist as well. Homophobia is not in any way a so-called African problem, and implying that is highly problematic. But also,
Chairperson, on a point of order, there's repeated, so many bizarre accusations made that have no bearing to what I said. To suggest that I'm saying the reverse. I said the reverse. Won't you listen, Shasha, instead of repeating something that's in your head, right, and lecturing to us, instead of engaging with us. Chairperson, can I raise a point of order? My point of order is that I absolutely did not say that it's actually an African issue. I said the reverse, that they are not demographically representative, Chairperson, nor did I say that I said the reverse, that we have got nothing in this budget that addresses the LGBTQ+ community directly. But I said, as a policy, we haven't abandoned it. Chairperson, it's completely wrong. She's not engaging with what I said. And I think she should actually be honest. Honest, really.
Okay, Honorable, Karim, can you allow Sasha to talk, please, Sasha?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Outburst and interruption highly inappropriate. I am not a she. I am a non-binary person who explicitly asked for my pronouns being they, their, them to be respected. I find it outrageous that we're talking about prioritizing queer issues while disrespecting a non-binary person's, pronouns. So just to state that. In any case, I said that that was implied by the comment that people in township spaces might not understand the gay rights issue. I find that outrageous. We also speak a lot about, how public finance spaces are supposedly subjected to this. We hear often the statement that Treasury is the whipping boy of all the social justice kind of outrage. And I want to say, I don't buy into this rhetoric of, oh, poor policymakers. I mean, the fact is that the skepticism is absolutely necessitated because, policy creators at the end of the day are necessary, budget allocations are absolutely supposed to indicate what priorities for spending and what priorities are for the public purse. So, of course, a fair amount of skepticism should be in this arena. To go right back to the beginning, and I'm wrapping up, Comrade Chair, I know I'm taking a fair amount of time, but to go back to the start, I did have some problem with the incorrect dates, but I think that, it's the fact that it's only us and COSATU here making input into some of these very severe decisions, which are going to have very severe impacts. I mean, I think absolutely shows that it's not just, my personal experience or, a subjective positionality that this public participation process has been flawed. Even when the Honorable Karim was speaking about, it's really difficult to create better public participation because we can't really extend processes out in the year any further than we do. I want to just highlight that that's problematic in itself because it assumes that public participation must always be as it is now, which is where people on the ground, people who are impacted by budget decisions and budget allocations are only able to register their inputs after the budget has been tabled. And again, the limitations in terms of creating impact when that's the order of things is incredibly limited. So, again, with groups like the Budget Justice Coalition, Imali Yetu, Vulega Mali, we have to absolutely see, better participation processes and accountability for this without the responders simply saying, yes, we agree public participation is important without any change actually happening to create more meaningful public participation processes. All of those groups have also suggested or implied that public participation can and should occur in the stages of creating the budget, so before the budget is actually tabled, in order to have more impact, and that is something we would again recommend here. The last point that I want to make is that in relation to the last speaker, the Budget Justice Coalition has strongly asked in the MTBPS submission to finance for human rights-based impact assessments to be undertaken in relation to the allocations made with public money, so that we are clearly aware of what the trade-offs are that are being made. Karim again spoke about trade-offs. And when we want, what we want to strongly say is that we understand that a budget is always about trade-offs. There are always winners and losers. But we find the trade-offs that we highlighted in our submission completely unacceptable. These are unacceptable trade-offs, not only because of the impacts on frontline service delivery and on human rights and access to social dignity, access to lives of justice, lives of dignity, which should be a constitutional right, but also because these investments, which we have suggested in our submission, are critical areas which would directly contribute to economic development, and they show a fiscally responsible decision-making around investments with limited resources, particularly because they are areas that have such a huge ability to impact on the triple problems of poverty, inequality, and unemployment in South Africa. If our budget is not looking at addressing those issues, then I really wonder what its purpose is. And then a final comment, just to register our response to the wage bill. I mean, it's absolutely outrageous that the wage bill is not targeting, top earners' salaries, but is coming from frontline service delivery in critical sectors, again, like education, in health. We find it absolutely unacceptable, and I'll conclude there. Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Thank you, Comrade Sasha. Comrade Matthew.
Sure. Okay, I can go, Comrade Chair, if you want.
Yes, I've called on you to take the platform.
Sure. No, thanks very much, Chair. And I think, look, without becoming a defender of Parliament, I can say from our experience as COSATU Chair and having been kind of doing this work for the past decade, I think Parliament does make a good effort to be inclusive and to give space for civil society. Even on this budget hearings, we saw the advert, but we were also actually contacted by the committee secretary to say, COSATU, don't you want to please come and give your submissions? And that normally is the experience we have with many committees, that they actually reach out to parties they know will have an interest, etc. I know it's difficult for some committees like Finance, Appropriations, Justice, Trade and Industry, which are normally very busy committees, have to deal with a huge plethora of bills and issues, etc. Not just bills, but also oversight work as well. But our experience is really that Parliament has gone out of its way to be inclusive across party lines. Chair, I think I understand the frustrations of civil society at times at what's the impact you make in Parliament. And I think even Honourable Karim makes reference to it. I think for us, it's more of a journey, it's a relationship. That's not going to happen overnight, but we can, at least as COSATU, say that there is some impacts. So, for example, there's a doubling of the presidential employment program from 11 billion rand to about 24 billion rand a year, each year over the next 3 years. That's creating 1 million jobs. So that's something. We have been raising quite sharply since last year, May, about the need to have some pension access for workers who are highly indebted. That's underway. In the previous Parliament, in the 5th Parliament, the Finance Committees, Honourable Chair, you were in that committee at that time with Honourable Karim, it really went out of its way to give us space. So not only did it give space for industry and labour and society around the VAT, around the sugar tax, the carbon tax, but it even stopped the retirement annuity laws to give space for engagement between business and labour and government. The Finance Committee had taken a DA members bill, the PIC Amendment Act, worked very closely with labour, with stakeholders, and passed it into law. And in fact, the members actually went out of their way to defend it, even when some members of the executive weren't in love with the bill. So I think we can say that from our side, the MPs have really tried their level best to engage. But I think, Chair, it's also not just for us to, as COSATU, to come and tell government what to do. Government and Parliament represent all of society, so not just labour, but also churches, NGOs, business, etc. They have to balance what can be done, what can't be done. But I think also, Chair, as much as we have our views as COSATU, we also do learn from the views of government, the real challenges facing the fiscus and the state. We also learn from civil society the issues. And I think many of the issues that the colleagues are raising are useful issues. But we also learn from members of Parliament as well, across party lines. Comrade Chair, there's a new Civil Union Amendment Act which came into effect earlier this year, further advancing the right of same-sex marriages. That was drafted by an opposition member of parliament in the 5th Parliament, a COPE MP. We also have managed to provide for paid paternity leave, and that is a bill drafted by a former ACDP MP that we have supported as COSATU and the ANC has supported, etc. So I think what we're seeing, Chair, is that Parliament is trying to an extent. It's improving, it's evolving. I think we're all learning from it, and it requires all of us to keep raising the issues, even when at times we'll be not successful. But I think we can say that there is many benefits to it. But having said that, Comrade Chair, I think that the results of the local elections, leave aside the party preferences, but the fact that only 1 out of a quarter of eligible adults voted, only 1 out of 2 registered voters voted, I think that is a wake-up call for all of us, irrespective of the color of our T-shirts, etc., that the public is frustrated and we need to fix what's wrong. But I think, Chair, let me just stop there, but I think I just wanted to make that point. And let me also say, just last on that point, Chair, without being in Mbongi, and I know I'll get into trouble, but I can say that for us, having members like Honorable Karim has made a huge difference to our work, that he's really given space to us as COSATU, even when at times he's told us that we are talking nonsense, we must also be more realistic, pragmatic. But I can also say that he's always gone out of his way to give us support, and that's something which really has made a huge difference to workers. But that, again, without being in Mbongi, Chair, I think, Chair, just getting to the questions, and I won't take long. I think to Honorable Ryder, COSATU has a healthy diversity. Of course, we also need to improve at times. There's some sectors we do very well in, like teachers, for example, clothing workers, but there's some sectors we do very poorly in, like farm workers, who are trying to improve. But I think we also try to raise issues that will benefit members who can raise it with government. And I think we also raise issues because I think Treasury also benefits from hearing society, what's their views. I think, Chair, to the point of DTIC, we really feel that if there's one department which has got a critical role in growing the economy, creating jobs, getting things moving, and a person who's got a job can take care of themselves, they'll be less dependent upon the state. There's then more space for the state to focus on the more vulnerable. That's why we really feel that if there's one department we need to reinforce and protect, it's DTIC. We should actually be giving them more money, not cutting the money. And the Honorable Ryder is right. 200 million rand for critical infrastructure is good as an adjustment, but it's a drop in the ocean. And we do become concerned about the cuts to manufacturing support, etc. We would love to see the DTIC budget being doubled because it's an investment that you receive returns similar to SARS. I would agree with Honorable Ryder about we need to see cuts in what management earns. I think for us, Comrade Chair, around Metro Rail, we're not convinced that PRASA is moving with the necessary speed or Department of Transport to fix what we've seen as almost a total collapse in the pandemic, inexplicably. We have been raising for some time as COSATU, even for DUSA colleagues as well, the need to revive the SAPS railway unit, a dedicated unit. There's worrying levels of concern around corruption, the security allocated to Metro Rail. But also we feel that if SAPS doesn't have the capacity right now, we should be looking at an engagement with the Defence Force to see if they can't also, at least in the short term, provide some sort of security to the railway lines, both for Metro Rail and for Transnet, because the level of theft, cable theft, etc., is really at an industrial level, in addition to other measures like banning the export of scrap metal and for copper, etc. But I think we would agree with Honorable Ryder that there really is a need for a much greater urgency around from government, but also from the private sector as well, around the economic recovery plan implementation, etc., because we are simply running out of time. I think Chair Honorable Ryder, Moletsane, and I think Njadu also raised the issues of rollovers. We had tried to just focus on some of the key ones, like, for example, the 582 million rand Vaal River, the 1.3 million rand for the Cape Town My City, and the shifting of 97 million rand from sanitation by basic education. So it is a worrying thing about the rollovers. You don't want government departments to spend for the sake of spending when they could save money through more efficient management practices, etc. But also you don't want to deny money which could have been better used by SASA, by DTIC, by the Presidential Employment Program, when some departments are just sitting on it for the sake of protecting turf. But of course, we also need to balance in the last quarter of the financial year against fiscal dumping, which many departments would do. I think the one difficulty, Comrade Chair, is that in the budgets, to be honest, the format is not always the most user-friendly, where often you find Treasury just provides a very clinical listing of numbers and doesn't often get into a qualitative assessment about what have they managed to do. Comrade Chair? Oh, okay. Sorry, Comrade Chair. Sorry, my apologies. So I think, yeah, there is a need for a reflection about what could be done to save money, spend it better. Also, Comrade Chair, the budget was silent upon the zero-based budgeting that is being piloted at public enterprises and I think one other department. But we would agree with honourable members that, rollover effectively denies money that could have been spent much better elsewhere. I think just to Honourable Njadu around the wage agreement, there is discussions taking place around the current 2022 wage agreement. We really hope that those engagements will be successful. We hope that they can be concluded before the February budget speech so that we can all focus on other critical pressing matters. I think, Chair, what really needs to happen is a win-win compromise, which does protect lower and middle income public servants, your nurses, your teachers, police officers, cleaners, etc., from inflation, looks at some cuts on the tops. But of course, it needs to come with a broader package of measures to address the huge fiscal leakages. But I think we've been heartened by the comments by the Minister of Finance, Comrade Madiba, to engage with organized labor at the PSCBC. We hope that will be a shift for the better. I think so the last three questions that Honorable Karim raised. I think the call by colleagues was from the Budget Collaborative or Budget Coalition around the LGBTI. I think those are important issues. There is currently a review of the ID policy framework by the Department of Home Affairs to include or to have a more expansive definition of identity, including ID numbers. I think there was a call that's closing today by the Portfolio Committee dealing with women around members of the public to also raise issues, broader issues. Honorable Karim is right to say when the abortion laws came into effect in 1996, thereabouts, I remember the local elections that time, it was a very hot issue in Cape Town, for example. I think we have made some progress. For example, the Same-Sex Marriages Act, Civil Union Act passed in 2006, and the strengthening of it since then. But clearly, there's much more work that needs to be done, because you can have good laws on paper in English, but in reality, if it's not implemented, then we need to see how can we constantly seek to improve and to take people with us. But I think there is progress on many fronts. Not enough, but there is. Chair, Honorable Karim is right on the issue of corruption. I mean, all of us have to deal with it. I think the fact that at ESCOM you have about 5,000 personnel out of 44,000 said to being implicated in the forensic audits, I think that points to all of us. And corruption doesn't discriminate. It affects you, all sectors, the churches, all political parties, all trade unions have had to deal with this cancer of corruption. And if we don't, all of us will pay the consequence. We've also been discussing, Comrade Chair, even in COSATU, about can we also do lifestyle audits? Because really, if we don't tackle this cancer, it will destroy all of us. Chair, just in the last question to Honorable Karim around the trade-offs, Honorable Karim is right. A budget is a compromise by nature. And I think hence you've seen from the trade unions across COSATU and FODUSA this year in the Public Service Wage Bill, a real compromise on many fronts, a very low increase, below inflation, once off. And we think we have to find those compromises because we also do want to see nurses and teachers being protected from inflation. We also want to see the presidential employment program being enhanced. We would like to see the 350 grant being extended, being enhanced. But we think there are also other ways, Chair, to assist the state. Investing in SARS generates more tax revenue. Tackling corruption saves more money for the fiscus, as the Honorable Ryder says. But also we have to grow the economy. If you can save companies, they can pay company tax. If you can save jobs, workers can pay income tax, pay VAT, etc. But it does require, I think, which is Honorable Karim's point, about all of us compromising. All of us must lead from the front and accept some compromises. And we've tried as COSATU to say, what can we do to assist? So hence we have pushed very hard over the past 18 months to release 63 billion Rand which is from the UIF, which is workers' contributions to saving jobs. That's managed to put money to about 5.5 million workers' pockets. And that is about 40% of the UIF's assets. And that has been our contribution to saving the economy. We've also said we can assist with Eskom getting its debt under control. And we think there is a need for some sort of consolidation, Comrade Chair, around, for example, can we consolidate SOEs or local government? But I think the point is that all of us have to make these contributions and compromises for the sake of all of our broader interests, but also to see that we can bring all of our constituencies on board with us. But let me stop there, Comrade Chair, and hopefully I've answered the questions. Thanks very much, Honourable Chair.
Thank you, Comrade Matthew. I see the hand of Comrade Karim has been up ever since. But before I give it to him, and thereafter I'll give Treasury to comment on issues. I see Comrade Sasha is out, and I thought she will be in the platform so that we can raise issues and not let her leave with on the stage that she is, because I, for one, I thought as a committee we need to talk to issues that she has raised, and I think we have done everything possible. And if the public interests are not responding to our invitation, we need to look back and find out why are they not responding, and are they not responding to our invitation in the NCOP and that of the NA. And also to say that we are not rigid. If there's an improvement, if there's a room for improvement, we are not rigid to improve, but also we cannot keep quiet if we think we're being attacked for not doing our work when we think we have done reasonably well in terms of inviting public to participate, because our work is all about participants. We are the servants of the public. It's unfortunate that she's not on the platform, and it was necessary that she's on the platform. She can hear what we are saying, and let's share views and reach a certain level. I just feel that sometimes we need to compromise and leave our emotions aside. I'm a gender activist myself, but not all of us are gender activists, and the language that we're using, we're part of the society. It's societal. So we can't be emotional and attack other people for using something that is common. We can only teach each other how we prefer to be addressed. And I think we are under attack as committee members. But well and fine, we will engage off the line and see how best does she think we can improve this, and see how the legislation, what is the legislation saying in terms of allowing us to do our work, because we can't do anything outside the legislation. Thank you very much. Honorable Karim, you can come in.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt you. This is Esther Ramani. I was co-presenting with Comrade Sasha, and my laptop is not working. I'm using my husband's laptop, and I can't raise the hand, but I do want to respond to 2 or 3 things, and I will communicate what you have said to my comrade Sasha. So will you give me a chance to speak now before Honorable Mr. Karim?
Okay, you can do that in brief, please, ma'am.
Okay, I'll be brief, but I do notice that the parliamentarians are being allowed to speak for a very long time without interruption, but we are being asked to be brief, and that is not fair, because these patterns of communication is what is pervasive in our society, and we need to find ways to change it. So first of all, I would like to congratulate Estelle and Luba Lalo for doing their work. Neither Sasha nor I nor any of the organizations feel that they have not done what they're supposed to do. And so please, there is no misunderstanding here. They are doing their work. But I would like to just say that this document, the AENE, is not a people-friendly document. Even for people with a PhD like me, it is difficult to process it. So there needs to be ways in which Parliament can, first of all, produce these documents in the local languages, and also find stylisticians who can rewrite the document in a register or style that can be understood by common people. Secondly, just putting the advertisement in all the languages in the newspapers is not going to promote public participation. We need strong communities, and we need to understand what is the role of government in building strong communities at a very local level so that they feel part of this process. At the moment, there's a great deal of distrust and skepticism about our government. You have to acknowledge that. And the reason why that is so is because of these facts that cannot be challenged. We are the most unequal country. We have the most unequal education system. We have the highest unemployment rates in the world. We have the highest levels of femicide country. We have the highest school dropout rates. Do I need to go on? So you can understand the frustration and anger of people on the ground that year after year, these budgets come out and very little changes. On the one hand, we have these billionaires, and on the other, we have people who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Everything that we have achieved has been as a result of fighting and shouting for it. The school nutrition meals last year, we know that for so many of the public school going children, that is the only nutritious meal they get during the day. And when COVID came, the government could not think of a way of providing meals, and Section 27, Equal Education, and other NGOs had to fight, take you to the court to have those meals provided. So please do not for a moment think that we are not speaking on behalf of the people. We don't want to fight about diversity, whether COSATU is more diverse than us. That is not important. We don't want to talk about whether or not government has achieved something. Yes, you have achieved something, but nearly not enough, not at all. If we have a country in which 13 million people go hungry at night, what kind of society is this? So I know that budgets are always trade-offs and compromises, but we have to ask, compromise between what and what? What are we compromising? What are we putting our money into? We have the most progressive constitution in the world, a constitution that is celebrated all over the world, but it's only on paper. When it comes to our reality, I have just pointed out, highest rape city in the world, highest levels of femicide, and so on and so forth. So please let us relook this whole budget procedure. Please let us try and build our communities. We don't have the answers, but we've got brilliant people. We've got people in the Institute for Economic Justice. We've got the Climate Justice Charter Movement people. We've got the Budget Justice Coalition. We have strong trade unions. Bring all these people to the table. Don't just limit yourselves to the people that you know and the people who will celebrate you for the small progresses we have made. That's all I want to say now. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Karim.
Chair, firstly, it'll take too long to respond to Sasha, but firstly, I apologize for using she. You will recall only yesterday I raised it, that we have to speak of they, and that's what we opted for, and I also checked. And I explained, and I'm not going to repeat that. Sasha wasn't listening. She wasn't interested in listening, is my take. She had these views in her head, and she was going to lecture to us as she did, Chairperson, but she wasn't here to engage. And the fact that after she gave us her lectures, strident lectures, not in the spirit of a public participation process, but it's a lecture. That's what she did. Arrogant, haughty, superior. Chairperson, it is wrong for somebody who's binary. They think that they are superior to the rest of us who are not, those of us who are not. It doesn't make binary people or those who have multiple sexual rights superior to those of us who don't have it. So that is wrong. And so I would like to apologize for the use of the word she, but it wasn't deliberate, as my own politics and values. And in fact, what I said yesterday, which I had no idea that a Sasha would emerge today. I'm simply saying, this was raised before Sasha appeared here. Secondly, I want to say that, it's both ways. Civil society, wherever they are, whether they are around basic education or libraries in schools and so on, one of the difficulties, and I've written about this, Chairperson, and spoken about it for many times, it's, civil society, obviously they focus on one particular issue or a limited set of issues, and they want what they want. That's right. But there are other civil society organizations that just as pro-poor as they are, just as committed to the disadvantaged as they are, sometimes even more so, who also have needs and interests. So when I listen to Esther, it sounds like platitudes with due respect to her, right? She's saying, yes, I recognize it's trade-offs, but what trade-offs? Obviously, again, we've been around since 1994. With due respect to her, we do talk about trade-offs, right? And we do find trade-offs where we can in the interest of the poor and the disadvantaged and the marginalized more generally. But this pro-poor, pro-marginalized approach that the ANC takes doesn't always meet the objective requirements. So we fail there. But the trade-off isn't an abstract trade-off, as she seems to think it is. I also think, Chairperson, what we asked them was, it was linked to an earlier point, the point that Matthew covered very well. And Matthew stopped here thanking Matthew for his kind words. But, and I don't mean to sound ungracious, but obviously all of us, not least me, need to do more. But here's a militant trade union federation saying it has many problems with Parliament, but it comes here to engage. And many times we've had robust exchanges, as Matthew has said, so especially in the last term in the NA. We told him, what are you really saying? And is it feasible and doable? So, one doesn't need like a reference from COSATU, but Matthew chose to do it on his own. And what I think he's saying is basically that they have lots of difficulties with us, but they still come and engage with you, and we have robust exchanges and even fights. We've had COSATU walk out in the mid-90s, Chairperson will recall, of public hearings and so on. But I don't recall in the 27 years I've been here, somebody behave in the way Sasha has. And she can watch this thing on YouTube, or her colleague Esther will communicate to her, but it's her decision to leave the meeting. For whatever reason, she may have a legitimate reason, but we can't now say, Chairperson, but because she's left, as you rightly point out, we can't respond to that because the meeting isn't her meeting. It's a collective meeting. And there are civil society actors here who actually are still here from the start of this meeting and will presumably be until the end. And what I want to say is, what I tried to say, Chairperson, I'm not going to cover it. It's very clear. She wasn't listening or chose not to listen. So basically what I was saying is we can't use the standards. Look, people who have multiple identities, sex identities, right, who are binary and so on, they're all over the world of all races and all classes. And they're human as everybody else is, and we must attend to their needs, true. But at the same time, the culture of Sweden, for example, and the culture of South Africa is very different. They can do things we can't, and we can do things they can't. And we have to take, as you said, Chairperson, people along with us. If we shoot too far ahead, we will leave them far behind. And that's not democratic either. But on the other hand, a party that's progressive has to lead. So we need to find those balances too, between being progressive and also carrying your constituency with you. She set out a whole lot of examples of our grotesque and outrageous inequalities, Chairperson. We have been discussing that all the time. There's no easy answers to it, but we know all the things she's saying. What we would like from civil society, as we've repeatedly said, and as we've said on appropriations issues, is don't just critique, make concrete proposals on where you think we can take money from and where do we put it in. And we've repeated that because to make critiques alone, I'm not saying they're only doing that, but that is a point that perhaps we should communicate to them. So they're not answering this question of how demographically representative they are. I mean, I don't hear them answer that question. They don't answer a concrete question. Did you go to the National Assembly, which is the main site of engaging on this particular bill? And to think that somehow you're going to come here on your first occasion, I haven't recalled them appearing, maybe they appeared at a different time when I wasn't here, and get all that you want is also unreasonable. To say that the public participation process is after the fact, well, it's not quite true, because what is happening here is we're setting the framework for the February budget. Also, Esther seems to conflate the roles of Parliament and government. The ENE and the AENE are not our documents. They're documents of Treasury, of the government. As far as I know, they used to do simple summaries of the budget. I don't know if they do it of the AENE and the ENE. It's done in several languages, Chairperson. It used to be attached to the printed newspapers for many years. It started with Trevor Manuel, I think in 1997 onwards. We also have this thing of, before a budget is presented, people are allowed through various communication forms, and increasingly it's become easier for ordinary people with, even the simplest of cell phones to communicate and say, this is what we want. You will recall, Chairperson, many ministers of finance over the years have actually done that. They will say, Velapi and Global from let's say, Msudusi has said this, and so on and so on. So there are many means of communicating to the Treasury before a budget is done. This is part of the process of communicating to Parliament, and our report will obviously go to Treasury. Does Treasury pay enough attention to our reports? No. Are we doing enough to persuade them to pay attention? Perhaps not. So we haven't denied. I even said before in my earlier input, Chairperson, that we haven't done enough. We haven't put anything into the bill on LGBTQ+. But as a policy, yes. So I wasn't saying there's anything in the AENE, so I don't know why she's saying that. I said it, I did, that's the fact. So you see, also, to suggest that somehow I'm suggesting that people in certain enclaves will not understand it, and it's like almost a racial disdain for African people, is outrageous, Chairperson. Outrageous. It's the reverse. The question Sasha must answer is it that her background, being who she is, middle class as she probably is, right, well off compared to the vast majority like you and I are, influences what she says? And does she speak on behalf of the rural people who have binary identities and so on? Where are they? That's the point I'm making. I said, it's not for me, even though I've been politically active so long, to decide for people out there. It's for others of you who live in those areas, who speak the languages, who should be here. That was my point. So she should ask whether her Eurocentric approach, not to the issue broadly, her approach specifically to the issue, is a reflection of her racial demographic. Now, I think I could go on, and I don't think we should be intimidated by Sasha, really. It's for her to engage, really. We've given her the opportunity. Her colleague, Esther, is here. So you're engaging with the organization and who they represent, the other organizations attached to them. So really, I don't know that one needs to go out of the way. That's your decision, Chairperson. But we shouldn't allow people to intimidate us by their theatrics here. They must engage with us, as does COSATU, as does a whole lot of as do a whole lot of civil society organizations. Many of them would take to the streets far more than I've heard this structure do. So I don't think we should be intimidated by them, Chairperson. I mean, really, this is the behavior here. She loves the word outrageous. Actually, most of the things are just false that she said. They are red herrings. It's made up in her head. And, her outrageous behavior is really something she needs to look at. Is she wanting to engage or not? Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson. I'm done. I haven't even started really. But, that's where I end for now. Chairperson, I'm done. Thank you. Lubabalo, is she connected? Njado, can you chair if our chairperson is cut off?
It looks like we have lost the chairperson.
Hello, good day.
Comrade Njado, can you chair, please?
Yes, Chairperson, thank you very much, Honorable Karim. I think where we were at the last point was that we had to invite National Treasury. So I think we did get the feedback from the members and also the feedback from the stakeholders. So I think the last part now will be that we hear from National Treasury. Can we invite National Treasury? Babalo?
Yes, Honorable Judge. My colleagues are here on the platform. They will come now. National Treasury colleagues, can you please take the platform as invited by the chair?
National Treasury, are you here?
Honorable members.
Yes, thank you. You can come on board. National Treasury, Cindy, are you there?
Request the table to confirm.
Good afternoon, honorable members. Good afternoon, Chairperson. Yes, there are some National Treasury officials on board. There's Spencer, there's Betsy. I don't know who. I think Spencer will probably lead the team. There's Mohatla.
A member who wishes to abstain or vote.
Who else is there? So I think Spencer.
Okay, somebody can you mute, please?
Okay, this is Spencer. Good morning, colleagues. Can I go ahead?
Just before you go ahead, Spencer, can we just check somebody just to mute? Then National Treasury, you're welcome. You may come.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson, Honorable Chairperson, and thank you, honorable members and colleagues from civil society for the input and presentations and discussions up to now. My name is Spencer Janari. I'm from National Treasury in Public Finance. And I'm not going to respond broadly to the input thus far. I suppose just to note issues around, particularly around the element of public participation and how we, I think, as a collective, need to work to do better in that regard. But I think that generally there were some interesting points that were made around the budget as a whole, and then specifically around certain elements in the budget. I think some of my other colleagues will respond to areas that they work in more particularly. I will just briefly, I think there were some points raised on the basic education, some of the changes proposed for the basic education vote in the presentation by the People's Budget Collaborative. And I'll just make a few comments about that, just suppose some points of clarification. So for example, on the workbooks, the performance that is 0% up to now, and the target is 100%. The target is 100% for the year. Performance is reported up to September, with 100% delivery of workbooks expected to happen in this quarter currently, for the workbooks to be used at the beginning of the first term next year. That is on track as I understand it. The other point that was also raised there as a major concern is a 12.8 million rand shift from goods and services in one of the programs, curriculum monitoring sub-program. That shift is from subsistence and travel because of the change in the monitoring methodology that we use now. Ever since last year, more and more, or less and less travel happens and more monitoring happens virtually. Meetings take place like this, as opposed to physically traveling from all over the country to meet each other. And that has resulted in those savings. So it's not compromising the monitoring of the curriculum at all. It's just that the monitoring is done differently, hence there's those savings. And I expect that that kind of saving will happen across the whole of government as this new way of doing things starts to become more in use. And then just a last point of clarification is about a shift from the school infrastructure budget of 97 million rand, so environment from there. And just to be clear, that is not from the infrastructure portion of that allocation. So it's not taking money away from the school building. That also is money away from the planning and the oversight of the school infrastructure programs across the whole of South Africa. And again, it's as a result of the change in the way of doing things, because they had to. That has resulted in those savings. But just to be clear, it's not a reduction in the allocation for the actual school building program. Those were all points from specific points related to basic education that I suppose we could respond to. The other areas, I don't know if my colleagues have things that they maybe want to specifically target or speak about or clarify. But from my side, Honorable Chair, that I think is all that I have to add. Thank you.
Provide a little bit of input. I have had to step back.
No. Order, Sasha, please.
I'm still here.
Sasha, Honorable Njatu, I'm sorry. I need to address this. I was writing a note here, trying to advise colleagues that we have a meeting procedure that we need to follow here. We have a meeting procedures that we need to respect. An opportunity, if it has been given to a stakeholder to address the committee, and the committee responds to that particular stakeholder, there is no way that that particular stakeholder can come back and just want to address the committee as and when they want to speak. Sasha had an opportunity to address the committee, and the committee members responded. Unfortunately, this has never happened, that a committee secretary has to address members of the public in a meeting like this. This is not my meeting. This is the meeting of the committee. Unfortunately, as a secretary, I need to make sure that meeting procedures are followed in a proper way. So, Sasha, kindly accept that you cannot just...
Okay, Lubabalo, thank you, Lubabalo. Thank you very much. Sasha, can we just give 1 second? Just 1 second. Thank you very much, Lubabalo. Let me also from the chair just correct the procedures of the meeting. Yeah, the procedure of the meeting was that from the beginning of this meeting, stakeholders was given an opportunity and there was a response by the members. And then after the response, no, Shasha, just hold on. Just hold on, Shasha. Please, man, just hold on. Shasha, you let me just finish. Shasha, you can't speak now, ne? You can't speak now. Let me finish as the chair. The meeting procedures, stakeholders was given the opportunity in the beginning. Then there was a response from the members. And now, and again, the stakeholders was given an opportunity to respond to the members. Now, the point where we are now in the meeting is that we are giving National Treasury to give their point and opinions on everything that was said in the meeting. So actually, we are at the last part of the meeting now. So the stakeholders, they cannot come back again because they was given their opportunity to respond. So Shasha, with that understanding, let's then, we say National Treasury is on the platform.
Point of order.
National Treasury is on the, no, who is calling for order?
I'm asking for a point of order, which is
no, Shasha, please, let's respect the meeting. Let's respect the meeting. We are now, the National Treasury is on the platform. National Treasury is speaking, so you cannot speak. You cannot speak. National Treasury is speaking. National Treasury has been giving the platform to speak. Can we take it from that point? We're not going to give you, because you cannot call for a point of order even. National Treasury is on the platform. National Treasury? National Treasury, are you still there?
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. I just wanted to add to thank you and good morning, honorable chairs. I just wanted to add to complement what Spencer has already reported to. Just point to two issues. One is that for rollovers, generally these are analyzed within the department, and the effort is not just to pass over the funds that were not spent in the previous year, but the idea is to meet obligations that have already been committed to, so that the related funding is still covered, is still provided for those. They are particularly analyzed, and not every request for rollover is approved. So it's not part of poor spending in most cases. So the analysis also consider when commitments were made and where the department or the institution is with the delivery, and whether the funds should then be retained for them to be able to settle the commitment that has already been made. That's one. And on the second issue, I see the issues that are raised regarding vote 20, which is regarding women, youth, and persons with disability, and issues around LGBTQI+. What we do, as many would have seen from the DPME this year, is what they're trying to do is women, youth, and persons with disability are already mainstreamed within our MTSF. So what the DPME does as part of their APP preparation, together with the Department of Women, they assess all the APPs just to see the extent to which these issues are addressed within the responses of the department. At this stage, most of those responses will not be very visible from the budget element. So the best place to look at will be within the department's APP and also reports. And those are basically the two issues I thought I should highlight. On the grants reductions over the MTF, that was in the 2021 MTF. It's the key issues that we still need to be, probably that is still going to be decided on politically, is with limited resources, how much can we have available for SRD continuation that is being proposed, versus ability to even give the inflation increase for the current grants. As is, we have a gap in in providing inflation increase for current social grants. So again, the balancing act will be required on the part of our political leadership to see how best can we use available resources to meet the gaps that we have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Your pronunciation is Pepetsi, eh?
Yes, Chair, I'm
Is that-
Bebezi Malika from Public Finance as well. I'm in the same group with Spencer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That is from National Treasury. Is there any further inputs from National Treasury?
Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Just to add on to what my colleagues from the National Treasury have said, my name is Dumebi Ubogu, and I'm also within the Public Finance Division. And I think just to highlight on, I think a few committee members have raised the issue on the underspending that has been classified under the provincial network, the public transport network grant. And just to, and this might go to the point that I'm not quite sure which member raised it, is around the classifications, and maybe we need more detail around classifications of some of the understanding that we are raising. If you remember, Chair and honorable members, in 2018, there was a budget facility for infrastructure program that was introduced as part of the budget reform to accelerate infrastructure delivery. And this reform was to be headed by the PICC, National Treasury, the DPME, and Economic Development at the time. And there were a few projects that were then evaluated and flagged for priority. And one of them was the phase under the MyCity program that would then benefit from the budget facility infrastructure program. However, this was then channeled through the PTNG grant. And what had happened was City of Cape Town had come to us and said they had to reassess how they were going to roll out the infrastructure program. However, at the time, when they did come to us, the bill was under review at the time. And what we're seeing as an underspending really is just a realignment with the infrastructure rollout program that the City of Cape Town has indicated is more aligned to how they can deliver the infrastructure. So I guess we're seeing it as an underspending, but really it's just a realignment of the infrastructure, which would then be drawn down later by the MyCity rollout program. And maybe this is where we can probably better clarify what the difference will be from something that's an underspending versus something that is just an error at the time, because it in effect is an error because it shouldn't have been. It's an error that classifies what the drawdown should look like for this BFI infrastructure and making it more aligned to what 2020, 21, 22 should look like. I hope that addresses the issue that was raised. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think that was the last response from National Treasury. And I just want to bring to the attention of the committee that this meeting was scheduled for 9 to 12. And now we are 10 minutes to 12. And just to outline again, and then to say in terms of Lubabalo, your role in the committee as the secretary of the committee is to advise the committee, which we are very appreciated in terms of your role that you are playing in the committee, and also to advise the committee in terms of procedures. So just to again emphasize the procedure of the committee of today, it's a public hearing, so that we know what the meaning of this committee is. A public hearing whereby we have given an opportunity to the stakeholders which were invited to the public hearing, and after that the members was engaging, and after that public stakeholders was again given a further opportunity to make further inputs. And then lastly, we give to National Treasury to give from a perspective of the administration of Parliament in terms of the appropriations, to give their overview on all the points that was raised from the stakeholders, from the members, and gain the further inputs of the stakeholders, and then to give the final input so that all of us understand as everything that was raised in this public hearing today, in this committee, are then given attention. So we then come to the end of this meeting now, whereby we, as scheduled, the meeting was scheduled for 9 to 12, and then that we are going to end this meeting. If there are any further issues, that must be done in writing. Let everything that is still was not responded properly on, and you feel that you were not happy, please do it in writing. We give that opportunity that you still can do that in writing. So we are going to close the meeting, and then to thank all the members of the committee, and also to thank all the stakeholders, and also to thank National Treasury and the administration of this committee. And just to mention that the chairperson was kicked out at the last part of the meeting. So when we're going to, for the purpose of the minutes, that we know that the chairperson was kicked out, the chairperson is in the meeting, and then that the chairperson was just kicked out. And then I'm closing the meeting on that note to say to everybody, thank you very much for your contributions, and thank you very much, and have a very good weekend. And then next week, Lubabalo, can you give us the update for what is going to happen next week?
Thank you, Acting Chairperson, and thank you, members of the committee. Next week on Tuesday, Acting Chair and members of the committee will be adopting 2 reports. The first one is the report on the adjustment appropriation bill. The second one is a report on the proposed division of revenue, allocation and conditional grants allocation to provinces and municipalities in terms of subsection 10 of the Money Act. So right now, one of the 2 reports is ready. The second one is still in the oven. As soon as we are ready, we will share that report with members anytime between now and latest Monday morning. Thank you, Honorable Tato. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Lubabalo. Just to double check again, the chairperson is still not yet back. Okay, if not, then
No.
Lubabalo, just to give us in writing, if also the updates of the meetings of next week will be greatly appreciated.
Yes, Honorable Judge, I can confirm that I've already sent out the notice for next week.
Okay, all right. Now, thank you very much, and thank you very much to everybody, and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Acting Chairperson. See you next week.
Thank you, Honorable. Thank you, Honorable.
Acting Chairperson, see you next week. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Have a good weekend.